amateur radio has certainly grown and really become modern. For you folks, for what you're doing, it'll be a huge asset to you. So looking forward to every single one of you getting through your exams. As far as taking the exam, I'm still working with our volunteer examiner or coordinator here to get something set up online. So that's not quite set yet. So more information on that later. I'll be chatting with him later this evening to see where we are. So the format, let's talk about that. I'm going to be using the Gordon West model. I don't know if every of y'all or all of you have gotten the book. I know some of you were having difficulty getting it. If you don't have the book yet, no worries. We're going to be going through all the questions and answers, but I will tell you that the question pool consists of 423 questions, of which you're going to see 35 on your exam. So going through the questions and answers with me just one time, even though we're going to be talking about some theory and such, it's really not going to get you ready for the exam. So you're going to need to spend some time studying. If you don't have the book, that's okay. I did, or I think maybe Miss Peggy did, send out a list of some websites that could help you quite a bit. And they'll go through the questions and answers with you as well. On there, my favorite one, and I'm not endorsed by them whatsoever, is hamstudy.org. I really like that one, but these websites are all set up to where personal preference kind of comes into play. So whichever one you like best, go with it. And they usually have a study mode, and then they'll just go through the questions and answers with hamstudy.org. Once you answer the question, there's a way for you to also click another link where you can get some more information as to why that's the answer. The other ones I'm sure do the same thing. So with that, what it will do is it will just keep track of how you're doing with the questions and answers, and the areas where you're weak, they'll keep questioning you there, but questioning you less on the stuff that you're strong, and start to get you ready for the exam. And then they have practice exams on there as well, where it will pull 35 questions in the format that you'll see on your test. And this brings up another thing. Back in the day, now I got my first amateur radio license when I was 10 years old. Back then, the study books really went all through the theory. You really had to understand the theory and the concepts so you can get yourself ready for the test. Now, back in the 80s, someone sued the federal government and told them, this specifically the FCC as well as the FAA, if the government is setting up questions and answers and it's not classified, then that's public information. You have to release that. Turns out the government lost. So all these questions and answers you're going to see, and the ones that you're going to practice on the websites, are the exact questions and answers you'll see on your test, word for word. Not only is it the exact questions word for word, it's the exact answers word for word, and it's the same distractors as well. It's a multiple choice test. So each question will have an A, B, C, or D. Obviously, one will be the right answer with 3 distractors. Those will be the exact same thing. They may not be in the exact order, but they'll be the exact distractors and exact answers word for word. So it's kind of a helpful thing, I suppose. What we're going to go through for the next several hours today, as well as on Saturday, is we're going to go through those questions and answers. And we're going to talk a little bit about why those are the answers. Now, in reality, when we get to the end, we're going to be actually starting off with more rules and regs kind of stuff, where the answers are just the answers. So we're going to be dealing with more rote memorization there. And then as we proceed and get into some of the theory, then we'll be talking more about why the theory is the theory, why electronics works the way it works. So I spent the last week or so, really, I see I have a chat here. Sorry, hopefully. Oh, excellent. Okay, thanks, Peggy. Where we're going to do this, I've got the slides. The instructor slides for the Gordon West program. I'm going to pull those up, but God knows that you don't want to listen to me for 8 hours today, nor on Saturday. So I've selected a few YouTube videos and a few select tracks from Gordon West's study CDs as well. So I'm going to give myself a break every once in a while and let somebody else from YouTube or from Gordon West to come on. And on the Gordon West stuff is going to be audio. And then we'll go continue on from there. And I think that will help enhance the program and try to keep it from being so boring, just listening to me all the time. Hopefully this will work. I've not had a chance to test this over Zoom, and I'm using these this headset. I think once we get to those videos and the audio, I'm going to have to pull the microphone because you'll be listening through them through the speaker on my computer. So we'll see how it works. I also have my radio station up. You can see that, the second video that says Wayne Greene, and there we go, right there. That is, I don't have a big station. I'm a big fan of the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, and stupid really applies to me sometimes. But I've got a real small setup there. Just to kind of give you a rundown real quick, I do have 2 Morse code keys. Morse code is when on HF Morse code, we call it CW. That's my favorite mode. I have a straight key here. That's probably something you're familiar with if you watched old Westerns and you've seen the telegraph stations. And I have an automatic key here. We call it a paddle key. And I'll demonstrate those after a while. Have an antenna tuner here. This is my HF radio there. I have an external sound card for digital modes, and then this is a keyer that's helping with my my automatic key, and I can set up whatever speed I want with that, and I do contesting with that as well. And then over, see if I can point over there where you see that yellow light, that is my VHF radio, and I have a microphone on there. I've also had to have it set up on my computer. There's another external sound card right over there, so I can do some digital stuff. All of this stuff you're going to see operate at some point or another through my computer once I start sharing my screen. So, and in fact, I think it's probably about time to do that. So let me see if I can do that. I'm going to go. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to do this, that. Let me pull up this. Oh, yeah, it's going to be share. Ah. Things are moving a bit slowly. Sorry about that. All right, can everybody still hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can hear you. And you started screen sharing.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, all right, and you can hear me still?
Yes.
Oh, now I can see people. I have explained to my wife I need a new computer. This has been a great computer, but it has aged. So let me go ahead and see if I can get through a couple of slides here and get us started. It says my screen is paused. Why is my screen paused? Yes. No, not yet. All right, come on. Oh. All right, we good?
Yes.
All right, here we go. All right, so these are the elements that we're going to be covering over the next couple of days, well, next couple of Saturdays. And we'll go ahead and get started. There's a frequency chart. For those of you who got the book, you'll find this in there. If you don't have this, you can always do a search. I call it going to the Google machine, but you can always do a search and find those. So if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and get started with some of the first things. When I do this with, oh, hang on, one of my dogs is coming in. When I do this with my kids, I teach kids this stuff as well. I usually don't have quite as many, so I'll go through questions and have somebody try to answer it. We'll probably refrain from doing that so that we can move on, I think. So, and then I'll just try to explain things. So if I get to the point to where nobody's hearing me, because for some reason I'm not seeing anybody's screens or anybody's video, somebody's probably gonna have to text me and let me know. So hopefully we're good. All right, here we go. So the first question, all right, we're doing rules and regs. Oh, by the way, this is for the US. For you folks from Canada, I did send you some information from your Canadian site, and I did see that I did get your response. So, thanks for that. So the theory stuff is definitely going to apply to you. The rules and regs, it applies to the US, but you'll find that some of it really does overlap with Canada as well. But but you're going to need to take a look at the Canada stuff. And I did see that that there are websites as well for testing for or preparing for the Canadian tests. So, all right, so here we go. So, which agency regulates and enforces the rules for the amateur radio service in the United States? That is the FCC, which is the Federal Communication. Oh, you got me? We're good. Hello.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, that's the Federal Communications Commission. So the Federal Communications Commission will, for the United States, handles everything that deals with basically RF spectrum or the radio frequency spectrum, which we'll learn more about that as we go. So really, that's the only thing you need to know here, the Federal Communications Commission. For Canada, I believe it's something like Industry Canada. That's who handles that. So it's not like I'm smart or anything. I looked it up yesterday, so, but I think it's Industry Canada. So here we go. The Federal Communications Commission. Which of the following is a purpose of the amateur radio service as stated in the FCC rules and regulations? The answer here is, I see, I've got some chats going on. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see them. The answer here is advancing the skills and the technical and communication phases of the radio art. Now, one thing about amateur radio, or we'll just go ahead and call ham radio, is somebody has sent me a text. I wonder if it's one of you.
George.
Looks like it's on slide 2.
Oh, okay. This is what we're seeing. Let's try it this way.
There we go.
Can everybody see that okay? See it well enough?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let's go about it this way. That way I can actually see some of, let me minimize this. And that way I can see some of you as well. And that makes it, I can actually see myself. That's just wonderful. So here we go. All right, so I will go back to the first one here, and there we go. So that was the first question: which agency regulates the which agency regulates and enforces the rules of amateur radio in the United States? The Federal Communications Commission. So that's just a rote memory thing. It's just keep in mind that that's who it is for the United States. Again, I think Canada, it's Industry Canada. Which of the following is the purpose of amateur radio service as stated in the FCC rules and regulations? And the answer there is advancing the skills and technical and communication phases of the radio art. And that's taken straight out of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, Part 97. So one thing you're going to find out about amateur radio or ham radio, we'll just call it ham radio because it's a lot easier to say now. Ham radio is that there's a lot of facets to it. It is huge, and we have a huge service with emergency communications. So we do volunteer our services for disaster relief or even things as simple as running parades, communications for parades or runs or something like that. But really the answer there is just keep in mind it's the advancing the skills and the technical and communication phases of the radio art. Anytime you have a question, by the way, just, I don't know, throw out the chat or just, say, hey, something like that. Just let me know. Let's keep this as informal as possible. I'm a big fan of being informal here. So for which license classes are new licenses currently available from the FCC? So for the United States, it is the technician, which is what you're studying for now. That is the first class of license, and the next is general, and the next is the amateur extra. So and as you advance, you will gain additional privileges, especially in the HF band. For the technician class, you have some privileges in HF band. They're kind of limited. HF band high frequency. Again, we'll learn more about that as we go. And then in general, the HF or high frequency bands really start to open up to you. And in the amateur extra, you have full privileges or full US privileges in the amateur radio band. I think in Canada, it's something like beginner and advanced or something. I think there's 2 classes, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Oh, you got technician in there too.
Oh, okay. All right. Good deal. All right. So when I got my license, it was novice, technician, general, advanced, and extra. There were 5 classes. But they brought it down to just the three: technician, general, and amateur extra. So that's your answer. It is technician, general, amateur extra. That is your three classes for the US anyway. How soon after passing the examination for your first amateur radio license may you operate a transmitter on an amateur radio service frequency? So this is kind of nice. The answer is as soon as it shows up in the database, as soon as your license shows up in the database. So you can go to the FCC, you'll go to the Universal License Service database, and all you do is you can look up your name. And as soon as you see a call sign attached to your name, you're up and running. You don't have to get any paperwork. In fact, they don't actually send you any paperwork anymore. I do have a friend of mine. He just lives a quarter mile up the street from me. He studied for his license. He took a week, studied for his license. Now he did have some, technical background, so that helped. But he studied for a week for his license, took the test, I kid you not, on a Friday night, online, took it online, took the test Friday night. He had his call sign by Saturday morning. That's the fastest I've ever seen it. It's usually about 2 or 3 business days, but this he got on Saturday morning. That was interesting. When I took mine, you actually had to go to a center. You took your test there. There's still volunteer examiners, which was nice, but you had to take your test there. It was all paper. You sent that in. You also sent in a postcard, and on the postcard, what you did is you had the FCC identify whether you passed or failed. So it'd be 2 weeks or more waiting on that. And then when that came in, if it said you passed, that was awesome, but you still had to wait another 3 or 4 weeks for you to get your call sign. So this, you can have your call sign in days. So the answer there is as soon as your operator station license grant appears in the FCC license database. What is proof of possession of an issued operator primary license grant? That's in the database as well. Your answer is C. The control operator's primary station license must appear in the FCC ULS. That's their database. You don't have to print anything out. You can if you want to. When you go in there, you can request an official copy, which I've done. So it's not a bad idea to have an official copy, and they will send it to you. But they don't do that automatically. It's all electronic now. Now let me close this door here. Well, they closed most of the way anyway. How many operator primary station license grants must be held by or may be held by any one person? It's just one. You will only get one. Now, one thing I want to mention about the 3 classes, the technician, general, and advanced, you can't skip those. You have to take those in succession. So if you have someone that got their technician through this and they want to just go right ahead and go to amateur extra, you're not going to be able to do that. You have to take the general test first and then take the amateur extra. But the idea here is you can only have one primary station license. And what is the normal term for an FCC issued primary station operator amateur radio license grant? It is 10 years. You have a 2-year grace period at the end of that 10 years. And what that is, your license has expired. You can't use your license or your call sign, but during that 2 years, if you renew, you can do so without having to take an exam, and you'll maintain your call sign. That's what that 2-year is for. After that 2 years is over with, if you want to get your re-get your license or regain your license, you'll have to take an exam, and you may or may not get your same call sign. So the answer there is C, 10 years. Grace period, I mentioned that a while ago, was the grace period following the expiration of an amateur license, which the license may be renewed. It is 2 years. So it's 10 years and then 2 years grace period. If your license has expired and is still within the allowable grace period, may you continue to operate? The answer is no, you cannot. Once it's expired, it is expired, even though you're inside that 2-year grace period. So far we have covered the first official chapter of questions that you may or may not see on your exam. Before I move on to the next one, do we have any questions, comments, anything? Go ahead.
Well, I have a question, since I'm in Michigan and I'm not far from Canada. So if I were to, how would that work if I were to talk to somebody across the river and into Canada? And as far as licensing goes, you only have to be licensed where you are, is that correct? Or where you're operating?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, once you and you can communicate with anybody else in the world, which would include Canada. It's in our lingo, we call that a DX, DX contact. But yeah, that's awesome. You'll be able to get into Canada and chat with anybody there that you want to. That's not a problem whatsoever. On Michigan, by the way, I've been around the world. For some reason, I've only been to Michigan once. That was in the Uper, and I went out to I took a ferry out to Isle Royal and did some canoeing out there. Beautiful area, so awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
yeah, I really liked it. All right, any other comments, questions,
I got a
anything?
question.
Yes, sir.
Bart. Hey, before we go any further, what does ham stand for?
Hey, that's a good, yeah, that's a good one, right? So there's a lot of legends out there as to why we're called hams, and I don't know if that is correct or whatever. I don't think anybody's ever come down to what it actually means. One of the legends is because we like to show off on the radio, and to be honest with you, I kind of like that one, so we'll go with that one. Back in the day when amateur radio really was just primarily CW, some people would say that the amateur radio operators were ham-fisted. The fist being meaning how well you can operate your key. But there's a ton of things out there, but it really doesn't mean, it's not an acronym. It doesn't mean anything. It's a carryover from somewheres that nobody can figure out where. So yeah, love that question. Cool. All right. Anybody else? All right, this is one of those areas where I'm going to experiment with something, because this is where I'm going to pull up a video. So I'm going to unplug my microphone and headset here. Hang on.
All right, how about now? No. Well, this is not good. One more time. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ah, there we go. All right, I know which one I need to use now. And now I was able to hear you. So let's see if this works. I hope it does. Oh, come on now. I need this to dot down. There we go.
Call signs. What do they mean and how are they created? Well, I'm going to take you through the process, so please keep watching for more. Hi, I'm Michael, Committing VBR, your host for Ham Radio Q&A. I'm on a mission to inspire and educate the ham radio community, so if this is your first time watching, please consider.
Are we not hearing that?
We hear it, but we don't see the video. I see something coming on the screen there.
All right. Well, I'll just let the I'll let the audio play. That's really the important part, and hopefully the video will catch up. Is that good?
Sure. Yes.
Consider hitting that subscribe button. Well, ST asked the following question. Are all call signs 6 characters? I have seen one that is 4 and was wondering what the rules are regarding letters and numbers. Well, thanks for that question. Prospective hams and even new amateur radio operators experience a bit of confusion when it comes to call signs. There seems to be an endless variety and variability, and for some, just don't make any sense at all. But call signs are vital, and once you are licensed, they become your on-air identity. So I'm going to talk a bit about call signs. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about the call sign system in the U.S. Every country has an allotment of call sign prefixes, and the method each country uses to assign their calls is different. for simplicity's sake, I'm going to concentrate on the United States. Even with that, this subject is complex enough. Well, in the U.S., call signs are regulated by the FCC. Call signs are issued to amateur radio operators through the sequential call sign system. This means that there is a pool of call signs, and when a new license is issued, the FCC goes into the pool and assigns that license a sequential call sign. So how are these call signs created? Well, stepping back a bit, we need to first look at the structure of a call sign. An amateur radio call sign consists of three components: the prefix, the region number, and the suffix. Looking at my call sign, KB9VBR, you can see the three parts. The prefix can be either 1 or 2 letters long. The region is a number from 0 to 9, and the suffix can be 1, 2, or 3 letters. I have what's called a 2x3 call sign. It contains a prefix of 2 letters and a suffix of 3 letters. Shorter call signs are called 1x2, 1x3, 2x1, or 2x2, depending on their combination of prefix and suffix letters. The call sign structure can define the license class of the radio amateur. Shorter call signs are held by higher level operators like extras or amateur advanced, and longer call signs are typically held by technicians and generals. But this may not always be the case, as when a person upgrades, they may keep their original call sign. For example, I'm an extra class operator, yet I'm still using my sequentially assigned call sign that I received more than 20 years ago. But if I wish, I could apply for a 1x2 or 2x1 vanity call sign. So now you know the structure. Let's break down the parts. We'll work backwards and talk about the suffix first. This is the really easy part, as it can be either 1, 2, or 3 letters long. The length depends on the class the license was issued for. When you take your test and receive your technician license, you'll receive a 2x3 call sign. The 3 letters of the suffix are issued in sequential order. For example, if you started at AAA, the first license would have a suffix of AAA, and the next AAB, AAC, et cetera, et cetera. When the FCC gets all the way through the sequence of suffix letters, they will increment the second character in the prefix and then start all over again. So my license, KB9VBR, was issued in 1999. 20 years later, in call sign region 9, we're now up to KD9O blank blank series. Next, we'll move into the region number. That's the number in the middle. Every amateur radio call sign has a number in it. This number corresponds to the region in which the call sign was issued. In the early days of amateur radio, and I'm talking like in the 19-teens, the United States was broken down into call sign regions. And I'll throw up a map here that shows where they're all located. The number 1 is in the Northeast, number 4 in the Southeast, 6 in California, and for some reason, 0 occupies a big portion of the Central Plains. I received my license in Wisconsin, so my call sign has a 9 in it. If I would have lived in Minnesota, I could have received a 0 call sign. So you can see how where you live can affect the number you receive. It used to be that when you moved into a new call sign region, you would have to request a new call sign. But that is no longer the case, and you can keep your call sign when you move. You can also request an outer region call sign number through the Vanity License Program, but more on that in a bit.
I close my eyes and I can see
your favorite shows.
This is what crazy.
You still with me? Good. This is where it gets interesting with the prefix. In the US, call signs start with the letters K, N, W, or AA through AL. What prefix you have usually indicates either how or when your license was issued, or what license class you hold. For example, in the early days of amateur radio, call signs would systematically be issued with a W prefix and a 3-letter suffix. As the W calls were used up, the FCC switched to the prefix K. When the novice license class was created in the 1950s, new license holders would receive a novice call sign with a KN prefix. When they upgraded generals, the N was dropped, and their 2x3 KN call sign was converted to a 1x3 K call sign. As the general license holders upgraded to extra, they receive a shorter 1x2 call sign. So there was an incentive to upgrade, as one of the perks was a shorter call sign. But this method was unsustainable as the amateur radio ranks grew, and the FCC quickly ran out of call signs again. When this happens, the feds will issue a call sign from the next lower pool. So as they ran out of 1x3 call signs, they switched to 2x3 call signs with a WA and then eventually WB, WC, and WD prefix. All right, so far so good. But to make things interesting, in the early 1980s, they switched again and started issuing call signs with the KA prefix. This started about the same time as the volunteer examiner system was rolled out. So I think it was a method to differentiate between licenses that were tested at an FCC office and those that tested with volunteer examiners. To make things even more confusing, when the code-free technician license came out in the late 1980s, those individuals received a 1x3 call sign starting with N. I believe this was done to differentiate between code-free technicians and the pre-1987 technicians, which tested for Morse code as part of receiving their license. Well, that pool quickly depleted, and by the late 1990s, they switched to 2x3 call signs, starting again with K. And that's where we are today. Systematically issued call signs have 2 characters, starting with the prefix K. Now, I didn't say anything about the prefixes AA through AL. These haven't been issued systematically to new license holders, but instead have been set aside for amateur extra class license holders. Like I mentioned earlier, the pool of 1x2 and 2x1 call signs for extras had been quickly depleted, so the FCC allowed extra class license holders to receive a 2x1 call sign starting with the letter A. There is one more exception to the prefix madness, and that has to do with the regions Alaska, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Caribbean areas, and Hawaii and the U.S. Pacific Islands. Since there is no region number for those areas, the region number map was created long before Alaska and Hawaii became states. Alaskan call sign holders could receive a prefix with a KL, NL, WL, or AL. Puerto Rican and Caribbean hams, KP, NP, or WP, and Hawaiian and the U.S. Pacific territories get AH, KH, NH, or WH. One of the perks of living in those states is that you'll receive a very distinctive sounding call sign. And I can guarantee that it'll be a conversation starter if you identify on the local repeater with one of those. Now, I hinted at this, and if you don't like your systematic call sign, you can change it. For example, if you upgrade your license, you can also request a new systematic call sign based on the pool, or you can go out and get yourself a vanity call sign. The vanity call sign program started in the mid-1990s. It's open to all amateur radio operators, and it gives them the ability to pick their own distinctive call sign based on the structure that is available to them. Technicians could request a 1x3 call sign, or extras, 2x2, 2x1, or 1x2. The vanity program makes it easy if you want to get a call sign that was held by a relative that passed away, or to pick up a call sign based on your initials, or say you have a call sign that is tough to say over the air and you want something more comprehensible or distinctive. The vanity program then is for you. I'll put a link to the program in the description below. And finally, international call signs. Each country has their own set of prefixes. Some are easy to identify over the air, and others are quite difficult. That's why a prefix chart comes in quite handy if you're chasing DX. Well, do you have any questions or comments on call signs? I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment below. I'll filter through them and add to the conversation. Who knows, your question might...
All right, everybody still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this without the headset, so that go back to the idea of keeping it simple, and that way I don't have to swap back and forth with sound cards. But hopefully you found something of interest with the call sign thing. That's what we're going to cover next. If you guys are okay with it too, once we finish up with this section, we'll take a break for a bit, and then we'll carry on. So can everybody still see my screen up? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the advantage of having this second computer running in here, I can actually see what y'all are seeing. So why I didn't utilize that a while ago, I don't know. So all right, let's go on with call signs. Here we go. When is an amateur station required to transmit its assigned call sign? So
Hey, Wayne.
Yes, sir.
You're not as loud and clear as you were when you had your headset on.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Can you still hear me okay though? You can still make out what I'm saying?
Yeah, just
Yes.
yeah. have to adapt to it.
All right. Yeah, let's try to do this because that way I don't have to swap the sound cards back and forth. But if it gets to the point where you can't hear me, it'd be more important for you to hear me. So then I'll start swapping sound cards as we need to. So when is an amateur station required to transmit its assigned call sign? So the answer here is every 10 minutes and at the end of your transmission. So does anybody have any idea why we not required to transmit our call sign at the beginning of a contact? No?
Nope.
All right. So really the reason is because you're going to do it anyway. If you're reaching out to somebody trying to contact someone, if I was going to reach out to a friend of mine over here on St. Simon's Island, I would start out with something like Kilo Mike 1 Tango Charlie Hotel. This is Kilo Bravo 4 Delta Sierra Fox. So you're already giving your call sign at the beginning anyway. That's how you're going to identify somebody. So the requirement there is not that you have to do it at the beginning. You're going to do it anyway. But every 10 minutes, approximately, it's not like you have to have a timer or anything running. And then at the end of your transmission, when you finish up, Kilo Mike 1, Tango Charlie Hotel, Kilo Bravo 4, Delta Sierra Fox 73. Nice to chat. We talk to you later. And I just ended that contact. And then throughout your throughout your conversation, you really only have to identify yourself. So every so often, when I'm getting ready to talk with someone and I've been in the conversation for a while, and I think it's about 10 minutes, I'll start my next transmission with, this is KB4 DSF or ID, and then I'll move on with my conversation. So the answer there is every 10 minutes and at the end of your transmission. When may an amateur station transmit without on-the-air identification? So there's only one time, and that is when you're when you are using your radio privileges to run remote controlled aircraft or boats or anything. Believe it or not, you can do that. That's kind of a neat feature. So if you do any kind of remote control or RC stuff, they come with pre-programmed usually frequencies, and you have to be concerned whether somebody else is on the same frequency because there's only so many frequencies within the unlicensed portions of the bands. But you can use your own frequency within inside the amateur radio band if you wish to do that. And you don't really the idea here is if you're controlling something like an airplane, especially, it's pretty expensive. You don't want your transmission where you're getting ready to put that airplane into a turn all of a sudden interrupted because you sent out a call sign. During that time, the airplane could turn right into the ground. Probably didn't want that, right? So that's really the only time when transmitting signals to control model craft. Who may select a desired call sign under the vanity call sign rules? So the answer here is anybody. Anybody that has a license can do so. A little bit of history about my call sign, KB4 DSF. I mentioned too that I got my license at a pretty young age. That was my original call that I got. So KB4 DSF. But I'll tell you, I had that all the way until I was in my 20s, I guess. At that point, I went into the Air Force and got interested into other things. I let my license lapse, and it lapsed for years, for a long time. Several years later, I decided I needed to get my license back. I had to retest. At the time when I lost my license, I was an amateur extra. So when I went to retest, I had to test the technician, the general, and amateur extra I did all of those in one sitting, but I walked out of there being licensed as an amateur extra again. But at that point, I did not receive KB4 DSF. I received KG4ZQY. Now, what might not make sense for you in the Morse code world or the CW world, which is where I like to operate, KG4ZQY is a crappy call sign to have because those letters are quite long when you're doing Morse code. But I kept it for years. I had convinced myself the reason why I did that is because ZQY sounded melodic. Yeah, I was kind of insane, I think. And I had so many people poke fun at me for such a stupid call sign. So I decided to go see if I can find a vanity call sign. And most people, when they find a vanity call sign, they try to find one that means something to them. So I mentioned to you a guy on St. Simon's Island, KM1 TCH. He was one of my former students. Actually, he just got his license about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I guess. Well, no, 2 or 3 months ago. His name is Mitch. Well, he went to go get a vanity call sign, and he found that KM1 TCH was available. So it looks like K Mitch, and he applied for it and got it. When I went to go find mine, I was looking for anything that had WEG in it or something to that effect for my initials. Nothing was there. I wanted to keep the number 4, because I am from the Southeast and I still live in the Southeast. On a whim, I jumped on there just to see if KB4 DSF was still available. Would you know it was, and it was still assigned to my name, and the address was when I still lived with my mom and dad as a kid in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I applied for it and I got it. So KB4 DSF is my call sign, and it actually is a vanity call sign, but it's also the call sign I originally was issued. So the answer here, again, as soon as you get your license, any license, you can go and get a vanity call sign. Which of the following is a valid call sign for technician class? For these, your answer is the first one, K1 XXX. You can get what we call a 1x3 if you wanted them, but there are other ones you can get. K1 HAM. I would like to find out who has that one. That's a neat one. But when you see this question here, K1 XXX, that's the one. That's the answer you are looking for. FCC rules regarding the use of a phonetic alphabet for station identification in amateur radio service. It's encouraged. It's not required. As you can imagine, if you have a call sign such as mine, it's KB4 DSF. It's kind of hard on the radio to differentiate the S and an F. Someone might think I'm saying SF or FS or FF, SS, who knows? So especially when I'm initially giving my call sign, I do go Delta Sierra Fox so that folks can know that that is DSF. So it is encouraged, but certainly not required. If you don't know the phonetic alphabet, you can look them up. Again, the Google machine, I think your book has it as well. Don't get hung up on the letters so much. There is no real official phonetic alphabet. For instance, A usually is alpha, but you'll hear alpha or able. B is usually bravo, but you'll hear bravo or baker. There's several out there, and people make up their own as well. But the idea of the phonetic alphabet is the first letter of the word you're using will identify the letter that you mean. So in case bravo means B, for me, Delta Sierra Fox, D, S, and then F. Which of the following is a requirement for issuance of a club station license? For this, you have to have at least 4 members. At least 4 members. That's really the only requirement there. So none of those other ones apply. Just keep in mind that you need at least 4 members in order to have a club station license. When using tactical identifiers such as race headquarters during a community service net operation, how often must your station transmit the FCC assigned call sign? Hey, you can use these tactical identifiers, and when I'm doing a lot of public service kind of stuff, we do use those. It does make things handy, but it does not preclude the fact that you still have to give your own call sign every 10 minutes. So make sure you do that. You give your own call sign every 10 minutes, even if you're using a tactical call sign. And tactical call signs, you can make those up. Those don't have to be issued by the FCC or anything. Go ahead. I think I heard somebody go ask a question. Or not. All right, we'll move on. Which of the following that should be unacceptable language to use for station identification when operating in a phone subband? Phone subband just means you're using voice. You're speaking into a microphone. English, for the United States, it is English. Now, if you're communicating with someone from another country or speak Spanish and you want to speak Spanish with them, you may, but you have to identify in English. Which of the following formats of a self-assigned indicator is acceptable when identifying using a phone transmission? So if I was operating in, say, that Whiskey 3 location there, you see W3, and even though my call sign is KB4, it's a KB4 DSF, I can actually identify as KB4 DSF stroke 3, slant 3, slash 3. It doesn't matter. All you're doing is identifying that you're actually operating in a different area, and you may be doing that for a special purpose, maybe a special event station or something to that effect. Here, the answer is all of these. Any of these work. Stroke, slant, slash, it doesn't matter. So you can use any of those. What is the International Telecommunications Union? So they are part of the United Nations, and the idea is try to coordinate the use of the radio frequency spectrum. I think we all know that the universe works off of the law of scarcity, and that's also applies with the radio frequency spectrum. There's only so much spectrum, so the ITU tries to coordinate all of that, and also coordinates agreements with different countries to be able to communicate with other countries and such. So the answer there is the ITU is part of the United Nations. So that is B, the United Nations Agency for Information and Communications Technology Issues.
Harder. Second.
With which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications? So that can happen. Then we're really talking sometimes about third-party communications as well. But if there is a country that is submitted to the ITU that they do not want a country or someone from that country, from another country, communicating with someone from their own country, they can do that. Your answer there is A. Any country whose administration has notified the ITU that it objects to such communications. There's a list of those countries. They, I think, exist in your book, but you can find them on the Google machine, or actually go into ITU. You can find them as well. So those countries are out there. I think right now North Korea is one, which is unfortunate. It's one of the only countries I've not actually been able to reach. So. What types of international communications are permitted to an FCC licensed amateur? So it's A, communications incidental to the purposes of amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. Yeah, you get into there's a lot of people do political communications, such their, talk. They can do that. That's fine. But the one thing you cannot use the amateur radio service for is business stuff. You can't use it to run a business or for anything for making a profit or something. But if it's incidental to the purposes of amateur radio service, which you'll find in Part 97, and remarks of personal character. So Part 97 also covers whenever we use our services or our abilities for emergency communications as well. What is meant by third-party communications? So A, a message from a control operator to another amateur station control operator on behalf of another person. So I look at this in two different ways. You remember Hurricane Maria, I believe it was, that devastated Puerto Rico. There were several people down there who were not able to communicate with family members here in the United States, as well as in Canada and others. So amateur radio operators, such as myself, offered our services to pass messages through radio to those folks so that some communication can happen. So whenever I receive a message and I forward that on, or if I'm communicating with someone on behalf of somebody else, that would be considered a third-party communication. But there's a different type, and it's kind of a neat one, and I like this one. And that is, if someone were to come into my station here, or if I'm operating out in the field, they're not a licensed operator, but they want to try amateur radio. They can. They can sit down at my station, and they can use it, and they can talk to somebody, and they'll be doing that on my behalf at that time. So that would be a third-party communication. I would be the control operator, it'd still be under my call sign. But this is great, especially when I'm teaching youth. I get them on the radio as often as possible, and man, they really like that. And then I have people that come over to my house and just want to get on the radio too, and that's kind of a neat thing to do. It's great PR for ham radio. So, am I hearing a question or a comment? Okay. Which of the following restrictions apply when a non-licensed person is allowed to speak to a foreign station using a station under the control of a technician class operator? So the foreign station must be one in which the U.S. Has a third-party agreement. So again, that's your answer is B there. If I have somebody who's not licensed sitting here in my chair operating my radio, and we just try to see if anybody's on the air and wants to talk, and I get somebody comes across from another country. Well, before I can allow that person who's not licensed to communicate with that person from another country, I got to look at this list to make sure that we have a third-party agreement with that country. And as long as we do, and most we do, as long as we do, then that person then can sit there and have a communications session. It could be with somebody in England or whatever. So that's kind of a neat thing there. But so to have third-party communications with other countries, there has to be an agreement with that other country. All right. And oh, by the way, Ms. Rose, we have that agreement with Canada, so you're good. When are you allowed to operate your amateur station in a foreign country? So here, the answer is A, when the foreign country authorizes it. So there are a number of countries, and there's a list. Once again, there's a number of countries that hold reciprocal agreements with us, and usually they may not require paperwork. Like for some countries, if you're an amateur extra, there's no paperwork required, but the other class licenses, they may require paperwork. It doesn't matter, but there's a reciprocal agreement, and you'd be able to go into that country and operate. So when the foreign country authorizes it.
Hey, Wayne, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Where do we find a list of what countries we have reciprocal agreements with?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I believe you'll find it in the book that we're using. You'll find it in there, and I'll take a look when we take our break here shortly.
Sure. Thanks.
I think the ITU may have it, but there's an organization that I really want you guys to be aware of. It's called the American Radio Relay League, and their website is arrl.org, and they are they're the United States representative to the ITU and the International Amateur Radio Union and such. And you'll find all kinds of great information there to include this list. So for Canada, it is Radio Amateur Canada, I think, RAC, I believe is the name of that group. Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. From which of the following locations may an FCC licensed amateur transmit? We're looking for D here. From any vessel or craft located in international waters that is documented or registered in the United States. I know a lot of cruise ships are not, but I think there's a couple. Most are I think Bahamian or something to that effect. But if it is registered in the United States, then you can operate that station as if you are in the United States, even if you're in international waters. You're going to need to make sure you reach out to the ship's captain first to do that. We have here in Brunswick, in the Golden Isles of Georgia, we have a gambling boat. And we actually weren't able to pull this off, but we were going to run a special event off the gambling boat simply because it goes into the international waters, hence being able to go gamble. We could care less about the gambling, but we wanted to operate from the international waters. But COVID hit, and that kind of ceased that. But that is obviously it is U.S. Flagged, and the captain had given us permission to do that. So, all right. So for the last 2 chapters of the book, those are all the questions that you could see on your exam for the last 2 chapters. We're really kind of dealing with rote memorization here and giving you some background information, but this stuff gets boring, right? So we've been at it for a couple of hours, I think, to include all the intros and such. So let's take a break, if you don't mind. Is everybody good with 15 minutes? Good?
Sounds good.
All right. 15 minutes. I'll keep my mic on for now. If I step away, I'll turn it off. But just in case anybody wants to have any comments, conversation, it doesn't matter. So I want to thank you all again for being a part of this and taking time out of your day to do it. And once we get into the theory stuff, I think we'll have a little bit more fun. And there'll be more. I'll have Gordon West talk and such like that as well. So all right. So let's. I see 10:02. Let's make it about 10:17.
Great. Thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome. For those of you who are still on, what's your weather like where you are?
It's
We're in North Carolina. It snowed yesterday.
Oh yeah. Where in North Carolina? No, I lost you. You muted. Let's see if I can nope, I can't unmute. Yeah, I didn't get that. You got.
Did you need me?
Ah,
Yeah, I can hear you.
yeah, I got you. So where in North Carolina?
Moravian Falls.
Oh, Moravian Falls. So I'm originally from Winston-Salem.
Oh, okay.
Yep. My our family, the Greene family, is actually out of Black Mountain. But I was raised in Winston-Salem. The funny thing is, I was actually born here in Georgia, in Albany, Georgia. My dad was a Marine at the time, but he took a job with a company called a tractor company called Gravely. They had opened a plant in the Winston-Salem area, so we moved from there to Winston-Salem when I was 2 years old. So obviously, I know nothing about Albany except from what I've seen in the movies, the Kirk Cameron movies. But so Winston-Salem, North Carolina is home for me. So, good deal.
On the East Coast.
I say that's home for me. The Golden Isles of Georgia is not home for me. This is our last stop. So that'll be Winston-Salem be my original home, I guess. But we moved here in 2013, I think. And then I retired from the Department of Defense down here, and this is where we're staying. So the fishing's good here. So. And even though we're right on the Atlantic coast, our house is actually just, I think it's about a mile from the Atlantic Ocean. And the weather is quite dreary today. It's been dreary for the last couple of days. I'm looking forward to the sunshine coming back out.
It's coming.
Yeah, we've got sunshine.
This time of year, we still see, 60s, 70s temperature. Now at night it could get down to, I suppose. And believe it or not, I remember when I first moved here, apparently there was a snow event that happened in 1986, and that was still big news. Just 2 years ago, maybe, we had an ice storm here. It actually snowed about 20 miles from here, but we had a big ice storm here. Power was out for a while and such. So now that's the big news. I guess that'll be the big news until the next freak event comes through.
So Wayne, you work in cybersecurity for the government. Can you share anything with us without endangering anything sensitive?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I work with a division.
Oh, you want out?
Along with the training center, there's a cyber division. I'm actually not a cyber guy though. I'm a technical surveillance person, and that's what I teach at FLETC. Of course, while I'm not in the field anymore, I'm retired. I still get reached out to quite a bit. We had mention of the upfront that happened just a couple of days ago. Myself and a few of my colleagues were being reached out to for some advice on handling some things, technical surveillance wise. And to try to identify some folks and such. So even all the way down here in Brunswick, Georgia, it was a busy day for me. But as far as the cyber world, I don't know that much. Did I hear help?
Yes, if you're not speaking, please mute your audio. But feel free to ask questions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm in a position now, which is kind of nice. I no longer have the security clearances I had. I actually get to live in a world where ignorance is bliss. Right now, I know too much. I'm ready to know little.
I know nothing. I leave.
That's right.
Well, thank you for your service to our country as a veteran, and for all that you're doing. And thank you for your heart for ham radio and teaching us newbies.
Oh yeah, no, my pleasure. And I hope this format works for you. So that I get to be a bit more interactive when I'm doing this in person, because I actually have equipment out and people are playing with the equipment. I'm passing things around, so I was racking my brain to try to find ways to, I guess emulate is not the right word, but emulate that, or at least try to substitute that in some way. So as we go on, I'll share my screen and I'll actually have my computer hooked up to my radio. And again, I do have that one video play, or that one camera pointing at my radio.
I know several have asked me about what radios to get. And I know you shared with Peggy, and Peggy sent out to everybody some suppliers.
Right.
And what do you have one handy of like a basic handheld model that would be good for beginners?
Actually, one of the topics we're going to be covering is your first radio. So I was going to show off a couple of radios that I think are really good to start with. So we'll cover that when we get there.
Wonderful.
And then we'll go on. I'll tell you my HF radio that you see there. For HF wise, I'll be honest with you, that's a really simple radio as well. I contest with that radio and I do quite well with it. It's not technically a contesting radio with many more bells and whistles, but again, I kind of like the KISS method. I get to be somewhat of a minimalist, much to my wife's chagrin, I think. I actually told her I could easily live in a tiny home, but she wants nothing to do with that. So, so this is a bare bones radio, but it does have 2 receivers in it and such, which so I can do split, which is might not know anything about that. But one thing I do like about this company is from a company called Tintech. I bought my first radio when I was 13. I still have that radio. It's now packed up in the attic, but that radio was a Morse code only radio. 20 watts is all it would put out. And I talked around the world on that 20 watts with Morse code. But Tintec is out of Sevierville, Tennessee. And they and one other company called Elecraft are the only two American-made amateur radio companies. Now, there used to be a company called Swan, and I actually have an old Swan 350. It was my uncle's radio. He let me borrow that when I first got my license. That was the first radio I ever operated. I have that radio now. I'm in the process of trying to restore it. It's an old tube radio, and I'm hoping I do that. I found out that it was in my dad, who's also a ham. It was in one of my dad's shops or buildings out at home. Been there for a while, so it has some black widow nests and such like that in there.
Great.
So, yeah.
What's the other U.S. made radio product?
Elecraft is the other one. They're out of California.
What's that one called?
Elecraft, E-L-E, Craft.
Elecraft. Great.
Yeah. Their radios can be pricey. Tintec can be as well. I think Elecraft is a little bit more pricey than Tintec, but I do prefer to buy, if at all possible, buy something American. All of my handhelds, and you can see those in the video. I do have my handhelds out because they're sitting on chargers, except for the one that's sitting next to my HF. Those are all Japanese, except for the Baofeng. I do have two Baofeng radios. Those are the cheap Chinese models. So, and I'll show off those when we get to that point, and some pluses and minuses and how to get started. Anyway.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Yeah.
So
Hey, Wayne.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Wasn't that last question sort of a trick question? Because it said, where can you transmit from? And then it restricted the answer to vessels. And I'm going, well, usually you're going to be on the ground somewhere.
Yeah, it's funny. So the way these questions work is there are a set of volunteer examiners, and they're a committee. And every so many years, I see 18 to 22. So what's 5 years? Every so many years, they redo the questions. They don't redo all of them. They'll take some out and bring some new ones in. But for some reason, that question there has been in the pool, to be honest with you, I think for decades. And I don't know why anybody's really stuck on that question, because I agree with you. It really doesn't apply that much. I think it's a dumb question. But there we have it, and it could be on your test. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Figure you guys are probably tired of watching me scratch my nose on the camera. That's the disadvantage of being on the camera all the time. Pick your nose and everybody sees it. All right, I'm showing 1018.
Yeah.
So if we're ready to get started, we'll go ahead and do so. Again, this is very informal, and we're doing rote memorization stuff. So I'm sorry to go about it this way. Little background: I have been teaching youth this, as well as computer programming and some computer science and such, for a few years now through a not-for-profit organization, a not-for-profit ministry that myself and a few others put together. We call it, you've probably heard the word STEM. That seems to be the buzzword these days, but science, technology, engineering, and math. So we started this STEM program. It is a Christ-centered STEM after-school program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We use STEM as a way to, if you will, to witness. Every single one of us are Christians. We're Jesus believers, Jesus lovers, and what we do is through this, we show love to these kids, and with the hopes, that they'll see that. But basically, what we're trying to do is be the Bible that they read, and so it gives them the opportunity to talk to us more about what it is that we believe in the love of Christ and such. So, but when I started doing the ham radio portion, I did it the way that happened back when I was a kid, where you went through these theory classes and such. I would have, say, 20 kids in a class, and out of those 20 kids, it was disappointing. I'd get 3 that would pass the exam, even though they had all the questions and answers, and I told them they had to study those questions and answers. I can't hold their hands, right? about 3 sessions ago of doing this, my mindset at that time was to teach the principals so that when they go take the test, they'll see the questions and answers, but they'll also have the principles to back themselves up to be able to answer the questions. Honestly, it didn't work with the kids. It just flat didn't work. So, and I never really liked this idea of going question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. But I've since changed my mindset. My mindset now is that the real learning happens once you get your license.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and really, it's just like being a doctor where you get a license to practice, right? That's what this is. It's a license to practice. It's a license to learn. The learning never ends. One thing I do love about this hobby, or the word I like to use is avocation, is there's always something new to learn. And for me, that's pretty important. So, yeah. So once you get your license, that's when you really start learning. So now I'm not so much against going question and answer, except it's just, and some people probably rather have a tooth pulled than going doing it that way, but I guess it is what it is. But in the theory stuff, we'll get into a little bit more background. When we do that, though, I do want to caution you. I don't want to get too deep, but I don't want to confuse a lot of people. There are questions and answers, and that's what you need to stick to. And then after you get your license, once you want to dig into further, that's great. Let's just not do so much to confuse each other. So. With that said, we will continue on and we'll start topic 3, which we're still in chapter 4, I guess. And that is control, and that is as far as controlling how to control your station. So the first question is, when is an amateur station, and everybody can see it, right? Yeah, okay. When is an amateur station permitted to transmit without a control operator? That is never. You're never, every station has to have a control operator, even if it's a remote station. And some of the remote stations, something you can think about there are repeaters, which we'll talk about more shortly. When there's no one actually physically there, but there's still a control operator. So for example, here, one of the best repeaters that we have in the Golden Isles is the KG4PXG repeater. The KG4PXG is a gentleman by the name of Worth. Let me tell you something about Worth. That guy is a legend in this area. When I first got here, got my radios up and I did I was on the VHF, hit the repeater and asked for a radio check. Worth is the first person here in this area I ever talked to. And that guy is interesting. And he has his own tower. He climbs his tower. He repairs his own tower. But let me tell you this other piece of information that's going to shock you about Worth. He's blind.
Wow.
Can't see. And I have witnessed him climb his 200-foot tower to do work on hardline coax to whenever it got lightning struck or something like that. That guy is absolutely amazing. And when it comes to radios, he's got a memory like you wouldn't believe. And if you talk to him on the radio, you'd never know he's blind. If you have a question about a radio, he'll tell you, hey, yeah, in your manual on channel 13, or I'm sorry, on page 13, it will say this. I mean, he knows all that stuff. He's crazy. All right, here we go. So again, that's the answer is D, never without a control operator. Who may be the control operator of a station communicating through an amateur satellite or space station? And that is any amateur whose license privileges allows them to transmit on the satellite uplink frequency. So we're going to be talking about space communications here. I think we'll get to that today. That's one of my favorite favorite things to do. There are amateur radio satellites up there. All of them are low Earth orbit right now, but we're looking at trying to get some high Earth orbits back up, which are nice. But once you get your license, all of these frequencies, the uplink frequencies, it doesn't matter about the downlink frequency. You can listen to whatever you want to. But the uplink frequency, that's what you're going to transmit on. They're all within the technician portion of the amateur radio band. So you will have privileges and the ability to communicate through satellites. And that includes the International Space Station. There is an amateur radio station for us to use on the International Space Station. So who must designate the station control operator? That's the station licensee. Don't get confused. It's not the FCC. The FCC issues station licenses, and this is my station here. This is station KB4DSF. But if KM1TCH wanted to come here, sit down at my station and operate as the control operator, I can let them do that. And at that point, this is not the KB4DSF station anymore. It's the KM1TCH station. So the answer there is the station licensee. When the control operator is not the station licensee who is responsible for the proper operation of the station, it is the control operator and the station licensee are equally responsible. I'm trying to think of an example of that. Control operator is not the station licensee who is responsible. Oh, okay, for contesting. So yeah, we do with my amateur radio club. We participate in a number of contests, and we'll get something called a special event call. It's a 1-by-1 call, and it's usually something like K4G or K4B. And that I'm usually the one that gets that because since I'm an amateur extra, if I get that, I'm the control operator. What's nice about that is anybody who's operating under the K4G umbrella can also operate within the amateur extra bands, even if they're not amateur extras. But in this case, if I'm not present, if I step out or something and somebody's operating as K4G and they goof up, I'm held responsible as the control operator of that station, but also the person who operated and made the goof up. So the answer is D, the control operator and the station licensee. What determines the transmitting privileges of an amateur station? Is a class of operator license held by the control operator. So once you get your license, you will be a control operator, but at the technician class level. So for all intents and purposes, you can only operate within the technician class bands. Again, unless you're operating under a special event called umbrella, and that's kind of a special thing. But yep, that is you have to, as a technician, you have to stay within the technician class bands. When under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be the control operator of the station operating in an exclusive amateur extra class operator segment of the amateur bands. So I want you to pay attention to this question. The answer is at no time. But you'll remember, I just said that if I were going to operate a special event station, and me as an amateur extra, I go and I get us a 1-by-1 special event call, says K4G, and I get KM1 TCH, who happens to be a technician, and he's going to come and operate under that station umbrella. Even though he is a technician, for that event, he can operate within the amateur extra bands because I'm an amateur extra. But pay attention to what the question says. The question says, when under normal circumstances. A special event is not a normal circumstance. That's the reason why they throw that little parenthetic phrase in there. So when under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be a control operator of the station operating in an exclusive amateur extra class operator segment of the amateur band? Never. At no time can they do that under normal circumstances. What is an amateur station control point? So that one is the station at which the control operator function is performed. It's where you are sitting. So there are now, with the advent of the internet and as reliable as it is now, there are a number of operators who live in, say, in a housing area that has an HOA or in some way restricted, antenna restricted. Those folks can go out and get some property somewhere else, maybe high up on a mountain or something, and put their antennas there and have a control link between their home, which could be several miles away, their home and their antenna. There could be an internet link there. And so they're actually able to operate their radios from their home, but their antenna is several miles away over an internet link. Well, the control station at that point would be where the operator is sitting. So that would be at their home, not where the antennas are. So the spot where you have complete capabilities, that's where you are sitting down. Which of the following is an example of automatic control? This is repeaters. Repeaters are automatically controlled. We'll talk about repeaters a little bit more later, but that's your answer, repeaters. They are remote controlled. Which of the following is an example of remote control as defined in Part 97? Operating a station over the internet. You can do that as well. So, and that would be a remote control for Part 97, operating a station over the internet. Which of the following is true of remote control operation? All of them are. So consider the control operator must be at the control point. The control operator is required at all times. The control operator indirectly manipulates the controls. All of those are true. So when you see this question, this is one of the few times where the answer is all of the above. Don't get caught with if you see all of the above, that must be the answer. There's a lot of them that's all of the above or none of the above. That is not the answer. What does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station unless documentation to the contrary is in the station records? And the answer is D, the station licensee. So the FCC presumes that this station here at my house, the one that you're seeing in the other camera, that is the FCC assumes that I am the station licensee for that station. In which of the following circumstances may the control operator of an amateur station receive compensation for operating that station? So there's only one situation where that is the case, and that is if it's incidental to the fact that they are teaching in a classroom and amateur radio is being used as part of the education or educational benefit. So I mentioned STEM a while ago: science, technology, engineering, and math. A lot of your STEM teachers in public schools, private schools, or even home schools, if you will, turns out they're ham radio operators, and they also see the benefit of using ham radio as a vehicle for teaching STEM. There's a lot that can teach here, and not only STEM and as far as learning about the art and science of radio, but in my case, I do that, but I also use radio as STEM to conduct science in itself. For instance, I have a set of kids now who have their technician's license. They're learning about weather. I'm helping them with weather. In fact, what's nice is we have a weather person down in Jacksonville. She did a video just for us to talk about how weather happens and such. But what we're doing is we're in the process of building a small little weather buoy, and that weather buoy is going to have two thermistors. One is measuring the air temperature, one's measuring the water temperature. It's going to have a barometric pressure sensor inside of there, a temperature sensor inside of the box itself, and it's all. They're also having to program it, do some computer programming. But what happens is these sensors collect this data, send it to a microcontroller, which converts that to a serial string, which goes to a terminal node controller, which we'll talk about shortly, and it's transmitted over radio, over amateur radio, through something called automatic packet reporting system, but we'll talk about shortly as well. So we're actually using radio to teach science, to learn more about science. And what I explained to them is we get the chance now to get the slightest little glimpse of the power and wonder of God, and His creation, in this case being weather. I could get paid for doing that. I don't, but if I were working for, say, a school or something, and I was a teacher, and I was incidentally getting paid by the school for being a teacher, I can continue to be paid while I am teaching amateur radio and operating the radio.
Well, how about them buying your equipment for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they could do that. Yeah. The schools, what's nice is your full-on schools, whatever. If they have a STEM teacher who's teaching radio, what they usually do is, especially if they have students have their licenses, the school will actually fund getting radios and equipment and such, and there will be a club station at that school. And there's actually an annual event called it's the ARRL runs it, the American Radio Relay League, but it's called the School Roundup. And it's a contest for the schools. And I'll get on the radio and I will contest as well to help the schools get as many points as they can. So that's kind of a neat thing. So
great.
Good. Again, thank you.
Wayne?
Yes, sir.
Cindy in Bethlehem, PA had a question. Can you use your neighbor's antenna?
I'm assuming the question also includes with them with their consent.
Yes, let's assume that they agree to that.
Oh, sure, yeah, you could do that. Yeah, as long as they agree to it. If don't just go trotting over there and plugging a cable to it, and you might end up in a fight with your neighbors. So, which if you like to fight, that could be fun. I don't know.
Hey, I have a piggyback question to that, Wayne.
Sure.
When you were talking about the remote control, as if, somebody had a tower on a mountaintop and they were controlling it, can two people do that then also, the remote control? And can they do it, not broadcast, can they use it at the same time?
Okay, so yeah, two different questions. One's yes, the other one's no. For the yes part, yeah, absolutely. More than one person can use those antennas as long as they have access to the internet site. It's usually like web-based. And what's neat too is once you get your general class license and you're wanting to expand into HF, if you don't have equipment, there's actually websites out there that people have set up that allow people to log in and use those antennas that's attached there. I'm trying, I think WebDX may be one. I've actually never done it, but of course, the downfall here is a lot of those antennas are usually they're directional antennas, something we'll talk about again later on, but they're usually directional antennas, and the directional antennas can be turned to certain positions to maybe better favor reaching Africa or something like that, right? Well, if you got somebody trying to reach Africa and another one trying to reach Japan, obviously we're going to have a conflict of them trying to operate that antenna. So they're usually limited to where only one person can be logged in as an operator, where several people can be logged in as listeners. And then once the operator is finished, they can give up control of their operation, and then someone else can take over as operator. How that works, how people take turns, and whether there's a time limit, I don't know that. But the answer to your question is, yeah, multiple people can be on there at the same time, but really only one can operate at a time. Okay. Any other questions before we go on? All right, good. All right, and this will be the last question for this section. Who is accountable should a repeater inadvertently retransmit communications that violate the FCC rules? And that would be the control operator of the originating station. So I want to kind of clarify that. So a repeater is exactly what it sounds like. It repeats. Now, a repeater actually operates off of two frequencies. When you transmit on a repeater, you're transmitting on one. That repeater is listening on that frequency you're transmitting, and it is simultaneously transmitting everything that you say on another frequency out. And these are great for boosting range, especially in the VHF and UHF range. Or if you live in the mountainous areas, there will be repeaters on top of the mountains that will allow you to get over the mountain to communicate with someone. But in this case, if you're the one that is talking on the radio, if I'm driving in my truck and I'm talking on my radio, I am the originating station, not the repeater. So if I were to do something wrong that violates the FCC rules, it's not the repeater control operator who's responsible. It is me as the originating station. Okay, did I make that clear? We good? All right, we're getting close to being done with the rote stuff. Whew, all right, let's see, let's move on. Mind the rules. And by the way, if you're interested, I mean, I do have a copy of it, but you can get them on the internet as well. Code of Federal Regulations. This is for the U.S. The Code of Federal Regulations, Part 97. That covers everything that has to do with amateur radio. What, if any, are the restrictions concerning transmission of language that may be considered indecent or obscene? Don't do it. That's the answer. Any such language is prohibited. For those of us here, I don't think this is rocket surgery, right? But you'll be amazed sometimes. I hear it. You'll be amazed if somebody will slip something out, one of those magic four-letter words. One thing that's nice about the amateur radio world is the FCC really did, while they are responsible for enforcing the rules, they really don't police us. We do a really good job of policing ourselves. And there's actually a structure in place with managers, section managers and such. And there are people who, that's what they do, is they volunteer to do it, but they take on the job to help police. And if there are any issues, then they will pass it on to the FCC, and the FCC they have the ability to fine. I've seen some heavy fines be levied. The FCC is a regulatory organization. So I don't know that they have the authorization to arrest. They would probably have to work through DOJ to do that, but they do have the authority to fine, and it could be a hefty fine. So this one for us, I think, should be a really easy answer. It's prohibited, absolutely prohibited. Don't pull any of that. So when is willful interference to the other amateur stations permitted? At no time. Don't do it. It happens. There was just, I think, within the last 3 months, a heavy fine placed on someone who was doing just that. I don't know why. It's unfortunate. It does happen, but it is It is illegal. Do not willfully interfere with someone. Especially when you get into HF bands, interference happens. It's incidental. But if you're doing it on purpose, that becomes a problem.
Hey, Wayne.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
If does that mean if you hear a conversation and you want to enter that conversation that you can't? Can you?
No, it does not mean that. You absolutely can. Let's talk about that in the VHF world. VHF, UHF is where primarily you're going to be operating once you get your technician license. If you're listening on a repeater, it's highly likely in your community somewhere there's a repeater that people use. It may belong to a club or something, but they're usually open where you can use it as well. And you're hearing a couple of people talk on there. Once somebody finishes a transmission, and it's etiquette, it's good etiquette. Once someone finishes a transmission, if they're talking to me, I'll wait a couple of seconds, 1001, 1002, something like that, you know? So if somebody else is out there who wants to jump in, it gives them the opportunity to get on the radio, and you can just say something as simple as contact, which is usually what I do, contact. If I'm the next one who's going to be talking on the radio, I'll be, KB4DSF, go ahead, contact. And boom, you can jump right in. The HF world, very similar. But yeah, if you hear people chatting, you certainly can jump in and ask if you can be a part of the conversation. One thing that's nice about hams, every single one of them that I've met or talked to of the radio, totally friendly. You want to jump on and have a conversation, they're more than welcome to let you into that.
So what's an example of interference?
An example of interference is if let's say that I decided on the ham radio band that for some reason 14.270, which is 14 megahertz, 14.270. Let's say that I decided that's my frequency. My dad and I, we get on that frequency every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My dad's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and that's how we communicate to see how family's doing, right? And 2 o'clock in the afternoon every day, that's what we do. But I tune in the radio, and I find that somebody else is using 14.270. What you should do at that point is just tune up or down and let my dad know I'm tuning up or down until I can find a frequency that's clear. But for some reason, I'm indignant and I think that frequency is mine. And I get on there, get off my frequency, you know, that kind of thing. That's willful interference. Right?
Okay.
Under which of the following circumstances may an amateur radio station make one-way transmissions? Yeah, you can do that when transmitting code practice. The American Radio Relay League does that pretty much every day. Information bulletins, a lot of people do that to include the ARRL. Transmissions necessary to provide emergency communications. One-way transmissions are acceptable in those circumstances, but we don't broadcast. Broadcasting is something that there are broadcast bands, the FM broadcast band and the AM broadcast band, where you get your music and news and such like that. But we don't broadcast. We don't do that. But there are certain circumstances where we can do one-way transmissions. An interesting one, especially around Christmas time, my favorite holiday, amateur radio clubs will actually get on and have someone to play Santa and read a bedtime story to any kid who may be listening on Christmas Eve or something, which I think is kind of cool. So.
Hey, Wayne, you make a mention here to CW, or the text does on the last question, CW. What is that? You mentioned CW before.
Yeah, CW, that is our lingo for Morse code. It actually comes from continuous wave. That's what it stands for. So anytime you hear CW, that means Morse code. Is that good? Did I answer that?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see, that one we just did, right? Yeah, okay, here we go. Under which of the following circumstances are amateur stations authorized to transmit signals related to broadcasting, program production, or news gathering, assuming no other means are available? So I told you that we don't broadcast, right? However, anytime when there is immediate safety to human life or the protection of property, the rules kind of go out the window, right? A saying that I like to use, and when a situation happens like that, you go do what you need to do. We'll follow up with everything else that has to be taken care of later. If I know that there's a situation where someone's life is in danger, I don't care what law it is. I'm going to go break it in order to go make sure that I do something to help that person. I will deal with the other stuff later on. And there's usually a means for that to be something okay to do. And that also applies here in amateur radio. So if there's something that falls outside of what you normally can do in amateur radio because of the laws, but you're doing it because of the immediate safety to life or protection of property, do what you need to do. And then we'll deal with the other stuff on the back end. When is it permissible to transmit messages encoded to hide their meaning? All right, there's only one circumstances when you can do that, and that's going back to working with model aircraft or model craft. In this case, we're saying model aircraft, but especially in the model aircraft world, if you're out there and you're using one of your frequencies that's afforded to you, you can't encode that frequency so that it does not allow somebody else to get in there to try to take over your aircraft and either try to do something nefarious or something just stupid or whatever. That's the only circumstance. Other than that, you're not allowed to do anything to encode your meaning. Now, saying that, and we'll cover this a little bit more later, we do have, it's just like in the CB world where you have the 10 codes and catch you on the flip side and all that such. Yeah, I started in CB too. We have our own lingo as well. We have Q signals, and oh, thanks, sweetheart. We have Q signals, and we have certain things such as 7.3. I don't know if I've used it with all of you, but we end with 7.3, and 7.3 is salutations, good luck, great talking to you, can't wait to hear it from you again. That's what that means. It's just a goodbye. And then we have Q signals like QTH. QTH is my location. My QTH is Brunswick, Georgia. QSL with a question mark. QSL, that means did you understand? Or QSL with that one means I understand. So we do have those, and even though they're a code, it's not meant to hide the meaning. There is a meaning behind the things that we say. Questions on that? That's one I get questions about quite a bit, actually. Under what conditions is an amateur station authorized to transmit music using a phone emission? That's when incidental to an authorized retransmission of manned spacecraft communications. I really don't have much of an example for this one. And this is another one of those questions that's been in the question pool for decades. And I don't know if it means anything, with waking up the astronauts or something like that like NASA does, and how that applies to amateur radio. I really don't know. But really the answer there is just when incidental to an authorized retransmission of manned space communications. So that's when it can happen. If you're in your vehicle and you have a radio in your vehicle, and then you have your FM broadcast radio playing, and if it's too loud and it's your FM broadcast is going over your radio, the ham you're talking to usually is kind enough to say, hey, you might want to turn your radio down so that you're not retransmitting that music or whatever, because we're getting the copyright kind of stuff. So. When may amateur radio operators use their stations to notify other amateurs of the availability of equipment for sale or trade? Yeah, you can do that. You can get on the radio, especially if you join up with a club. The club will probably have something called a net where they get on the radio once a week. They'll have a net control operator, and everybody will check in. That's what's called check into the net. And you may check in and say, hey, I've got this 10-tech Eagle here, and I've had it for a while. I need to get rid of this so I can buy something else. I'm going to sell it for about $500. Absolutely, you can do that. That's not a problem. It just can't be a regular event, like you're running a pawn shop over your club's net or whatever. So, so the answer is A. When the equipment is normally used in an amateur station and such activity is not conducted on a regular basis. When must the station licensee make the station and its records available for the FCC for FCC inspection? It's at any time upon request by an FCC representative. I also want you to notice there, it doesn't say anything about a subpoena, doesn't say anything about a court order or whatever. But if you get an FCC representative, an actual, someone who can truly identify themselves as an FCC representative, then you have to make your records available for inspection. Now, I'd like to cover this question just a little bit. What records do you think would be available? What records? So I find this one funny because there are none other than your license. And you can get that off of the ULS. if you have a logbook, I do, you have a logbook, and that's where I keep track of, who all I've talked to and when, and that's for posterity. I don't think it's technically considered a station record. That's not, there's nothing that identifies as a station record. So I don't really understand the point of that question. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't ever remember that happening. But that's the answer. Anytime that the FCC, an FCC representative, if they come knocking on your door and want to see your station records, you have to make them available to them. To be honest with you, even though my logs are not, I don't consider to be station records, I don't mind if they look at those either. So I'd show them that. What may result when correspondence from the FCC is returned as undeliverable because the grantee failed to provide and maintain a correct mailing address with the FCC? In this case, it would be, you could lose your license or it could be suspended. So when we listened to the gentleman talk about call signs a while ago, and he mentioned that back in the day, if you, like I live in a 4 area, I live in the Southeast US, so my call sign has the number 4 in it. If I were to move to say the Northeast to an area that that's a 2 call sign, I was required to send in a postcard to the FCC, let them know that I've moved, give them my new address, and they would reassign me a call sign with a 2 in it. That's no longer the case. You can have a 4 call sign anywhere, like KM1 TCH. This is a 4 area, but he has a 1 in his call sign. He did that for his vanity call. But the onus is still on us to make sure that FCC database has the correct mailing address. You can do that through the ULS now. You don't have to send anything to the FCC. You can do it all online. But that's so if they send correspondence to you, then it needs to be able to reach you. And if they send correspondence and it gets kicked back, they'll try a couple more times. But if they aren't able to reach you, yeah, they'll at least suspend your license. And then if they never reach you, they'll just go ahead and turn your license off. And you may not even know it. You'll be operating illegally. So, all right, we have covered for the last, what seems like forever, I'm sure, rules and regs. That's for the US. And like I said, for you folks for Canada, a lot of this is still going to apply. Canada follows a lot of the same kind of stuff, but you will need to get the specifics from, I believe, the RAC. So before we move on to anything kind of technical, let me see if there are any questions or comments or anything out there that that you'd like to throw out.
I have a question. How many questions are on that test to involve regulation?
Oh, you know what? That's a really good question. On our next break, I'll look that up. And it's actually these elements, we're dealing with element 2, right? So element 2 is broken into sub-elements, and there are a certain number of sub-elements that are on each test. So rules and regs are going to cover, I think 3 or 4 different sub-elements. So it'll be a sum of those. But there are a number for the technician class license. Most they're going to get a number of questions on rules and regs because they want to make sure that you do understand that, at least to some degree, to where you can operate, where you know how to operate legally, right? And you're going to have some technical questions. And then as you advance, your rules and regs questions are going to start getting less and less,
Okay.
but the technical questions are going to get more and more, right?
Makes sense. Okay.
And the amateur extra, I hope all of you decide to go for your amateur extra, but get ready because, I mean, there's some mind-blowing stuff in there. You deal with imaginary numbers. Have you heard of imaginary numbers? Have you guys dealt with like calculus and such like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I hadn't done that since high school. Yeah. I wanted to hang myself.
Our budget.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was nuts. And yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff in your amateur extra. So
Thank you.
any other questions or comments before we move on? All right. So at this point, I'm going to, hopefully this will work. I'm saying that a lot. I'm going to get Gordon to chat with us a bit. Now, this is just audio. So let me get my notes here. It's going to be track 5. This is just audio, so don't worry about any kind of video. But in this audio, he's going to cover some RF stuff. As a number of things that we covered already, he's going to cover again, which is kind of nice. So it's a fairly lengthy audio, several minutes. But you're going to get to listen to him and And I think this will help break things up a little bit. So if we're all ready, if I can see all of your cameras, or at least the ones that are on my screen. If you can't hear, just give me a thumb down or whatever, or send me a text or chat or something so I can know that you can't hear it. So here we go. CD spinning up.
I enjoy always learning new things, but I get surprised like this weekend working Europe on 40.
Wow.
At 9 o'clock at night. And it was really fun working Western Europe. And it just caught me off guard to hear all the United States, too. N6BOB.
Well, thanks, Bob. N6BOB. Wow. Working Europe on high frequency with the technician class privileges.
Something old, something new. Amateur radio has something for you. Don't forget your classic high-frequency radio privileges for exciting worldwide communications.
Let's talk about technician class frequencies. We're on track 5. What is the abbreviation when we talk about radio signals of all types? Well, radio signals are electrical and magnetic energy. They travel at the velocity of light waves, and we call them RF for radio frequencies, and that's capital letters RF. What type of wave carries radio signals between transmitting and receiving stations? Again, that is called an electromagnetic radio wave, or just electromagnetic, composed of electric and magnetic fields. And they travel at the velocity or the speed of light, 300 million meters per second. Again, 300 million meters, 300, 000, 000 meters per second. We're down here on the 80 meter band. And did you know you have privileges on the worldwide band using CW, Morse code? From 3525 kilohertz up to 3600 kilohertz on 80 meters. This is for you as a technician class operator and higher grades to operate CW. And let me turn on the noise blanker. Ah, there. Now we have a little better reception. Now let's go to 40 meters. Well, that's a pretty good signal, found from 7025 to 7125 kilohertz, 40 meters, where you on the worldwide bands have privileges as a technician class operator on 40 meters CW. Now let's go up to the worldwide band 15 meters and listen to your CW privileges on 15. Wow, they're really honking on 15, huh? A little bit of noise up here, but we're getting signals in from Europe on 15 meters CW, 21025 kilohertz up to 21200 kilohertz. Your privileges for CW on the 15 meter band. All right, ready for CW data and voice privileges on a worldwide band called 10 meters? Here we go. Let's first tune in the CW on 10 meters. And what we're listening to are beacons on 10 meters, 28.2 megahertz to 28.3 megahertz, the beacon portion of 10 meters. And I'll remind you that at 28.200, you can tune into the NCDXF IARU International Beacon Network. But this lets us know that the band is open when we hear these beacons on 28.2 to 28.3. From 28.0 up to 28.200, there, of course, is CW from one ham to another. But guess what else you get on the 10 meter band for some worldwide DX with your laptop? Hear that sound? Yeah. That's data. And at the bottom of the 10 meter band, you have data privileges as well. So if you're into computers, we've got the sounds just for you. We'll just tune them in. Yeah, there we go. Hi, Jerry.
Name is Bob. Wow, all that coming over your laptop. Now let's go to 28.3 megahertz to 28.5 megahertz. We'll say goodbye to the digital modes, and we're going to hear some fun stuff from 28.3 to 28.5 with your new tech privileges. Yeah, voice on 10 meters.
Just kind of up and down a little bit, but
This station is coming in over 2,000 miles away on your privileges on the 10-meter band, 28.3 to 28.5.
real nice. It's just not real strong on the signal, so I guess that's really all you need.
So when you get your new technician class license, you too will be able to purchase a worldwide radio, be able to put up that big antenna and put out a big signal here on 10 meters as well as 15, 40, and 80 meters CW.
We're driving an AL80A Ameritron amplifier.
Certainly is. You can hear that amplifier in the background humming.
Up there around between 600 and 700 watts. Nothing real high power.
Now, you'll be limited to 200 watts on the 10-meter band, but hey, no problem. You're going to have plenty of privileges and plenty of excitement on 10 meters. Our privileges go well above 10 meters. You get all of 6 meters, all of 2 meters, all of the 222 megahertz band, all of the 440 megahertz band, 900 megahertz, 1240 megahertz, and higher. But wait a minute, what are they going to ask on the examination? Well, I'm happy to say they're not going to give you a lot of test questions on frequencies, but you do need to know the basic unit of the frequency, and that is the hertz. Stands for cycles per second. There's different ways of calling hertz on our different ham bands. For instance, 3.525 megahertz on your radio dial is the same thing as 3525 kilohertz. So to go from megahertz to kilohertz, mega means a million, kilo means 1,000. Move the decimal point going megahertz to kilohertz, 3 places to the right. Megahertz is always abbreviated with a big M, a big H, and a little Z. Kilohertz is abbreviated with a little k, a big H, and a little Z. What is the name for the distance a radio wave travels during one complete cycle? Well, that's a radio wave length. That's right, the radio wave's wavelength. And wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional. And in a few minutes, we'll tell you the magic number 300. Remember 300 million meters per second? I think I got it. How do we call different radio bands? I want you to be sure and get a 2-meter and a 440 megahertz radio, a dual band radio. 2 meters, if you divide 2 into 300, comes out about 150, and that's very close enough to the 2-meter band, which is 144 to 148 megahertz. The 70 centimeter band is the 440 megahertz band, and that extends from 420 to 450 megahertz. How does the wavelength of a radio wave relate to its frequency? Well, the wavelength gets shorter as the frequency increases. There is a formula for converting frequency to wavelength in meters, and that is wavelength in meters equals 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz. So megahertz or wavelength into 300 will come out what you're looking for as the correct answer. Again, the way we calculate frequency to wavelength is wavelength in meters equals 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz. Your worldwide bands that bounce off the ionosphere is called the high frequency range, and high frequency goes from 3 megahertz to 30 megahertz. On the test, they abbreviate high frequency as simply capital letters HF. As a technician class operator, you can run up to 200 watts on HF, high frequency. Very high frequency goes from 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz, and you'll see that in my book. Very high frequency is abbreviated VHF. Ultra high frequency is abbreviated UHF and it extends from 300 to 3000 megahertz. Remember, megahertz, mega, capital M, capital H, little z. And on the VHF and UHF and higher frequencies, we can run up to 1500 watts, but only 200 watts down on HF. Let's try that wavelength and meters routine. Whatever you have divided into what number? That's right, 300. What frequency is within the 6 meter band? What is 6 into 300? Got it? 6 into 300 is 50. And the only answer is 52.525. How about the amateur radio station transmitting on 146.52 megahertz? That's the 2 meter band, 144 to 148 megahertz. If you divide 300 by 146, it comes out about 2. Which of the bands available to technician class operators have mode restricted subbands? And that means at the very bottom of the 6 meter band, the 2 meter band, and the 1 1/4 meter band is mode restriction for this mode, and that is CW. They call that mode restricted. 6 meters, 2 meters, and 1 1/4 meters. And what emission mode is permitted in the mode restricted bands from 50.0 to 50.1? That would be CW. And sure enough, there we have it as CW. So that's what happens at the very bottom of those bands. Now, what amateur band are you using if you're transmitting on 223.5? Let's listen in and see what's happening at 223.5. Wow, a couple hams talking about handhelds on the simplex frequency, 223.5.
I bought my first radio in 93.
This is FM frequency modulation that we use on 2 meter band, the 222 megahertz band, 440 band, and 900 and 1200. A lot of FM. What happens now down on 219 to 220? Well, let's take a listen, and you're going to hear something pretty strange where your technician class privileges allow you 219 to 220. Wow, what's that? Well, that's data. So between 219 and 220, fixed digital data message forwarding systems only. Remember, the 222 megahertz band is sometimes called the 1 1/4 meter band, or the 1.25 meter band. 1 1/4 meters means it's the 222 megahertz band. Well, let's go a little higher in frequency and go up to the 440 megahertz band. That's 70 centimeters, and that's up on UHF, ultra high frequency. Ultra high frequency extends from 300 megahertz to 3000 megahertz. The 70 centimeter band would be any frequency between 420 and 450 megahertz. So 443 would be a 70 centimeter band. 446 would be the 70 centimeter band national calling frequency. 446. So if you have a dual band radio and you're looking to make a contact, try 446. And there's a band even above the 70 centimeter band that they make ham radio tri-band handhelds on, and that's 1296 megahertz, 1296 megahertz, very close to our GPS downlink frequencies. And the 1296 megahertz band, commit this to memory, it's called the 23 centimeter band, 23 centimeters, 1296. And we're going to go over these numbers with you before the final exam. Throughout the bands, we have different types of modes. We have FM, and we have sideband and CW and data. And we follow the band plan. And the band plan is a voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur radio band. Well, how do I know where to do what on the new ham radio handheld? Well, that's why we encourage you get it pre-programmed ahead of time with local repeater frequencies and some simplex channels and get started that way. The FCC has a rule that says on some bands, like our 70 centimeter band, that's the 440 band, we are secondary to the military. What does that mean? It means the military comes first. We are secondary. And up in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as along portions of the Northeast coast, we cannot run high power on 70 centimeters because the military is using that band for over-the-horizon radar. And we're not allowed to cause harmful interference to primary military users. And if we were on the 23 centimeter ham band, yakking away with buddies, and a military station comes on and says you're causing some harmful interference, then we would have to stop operation and take steps to eliminate that harmful interference. Finally, when we operate on any ham bands, we try and stay away from the edge of the ham band. I mean, you wouldn't sit on the edge of a wall on a 20-story building, would you? No, you might topple over. Well, we stay away from band edges in case our transmitter's drifting a little bit to make sure that none of our modulation, that means our voice, goes beyond the band edge. And maybe the transmitter we're on is not properly calibrated. So stay away from band edges.
One NER, best part of ham radio for our students. Over.
Good morning, Gordon, and the students there. Ham radio is being able to make new friends and talking to all my friends, close and afar. It's just really a great hobby. And if you're a gabber box and you like to talk, you'll find people to talk to out here. WA1NER. And Gordon, tell them write it down and show them that's my last name.
WA1NER, and that is his last name built into his call sign thanks to Vanity Call Sign. Wow, the DX is really coming in on the 10-meter band. When you get your new call sign, you're going to be right on the air with a lot of friends here on ham radio.
Terry in Sacramento. What I appreciate most about ham radio, I think, is the excitement and the amazement that I get every time I turn on the radio and make contact with somebody from Canada, Maine, Florida, Japan, Hawaii, South America, or just about anywhere else in the world, as well as just around the corner. The constant opportunities to learn, the opportunities to help other people in times of need, and the friendships are very important to me.
That's great. Well, you see how much fun you're going to have in ham radio. It's time now for keywords. Keywords are those words that you see in the book that are highlighted in blue that are the correct answer to remember for the test. Here on audio, we're going to mention those correct answers as keywords. Here we go. The agency that regulates the amateur radio service, FCC. The purpose of ham radio, phases of the radio art and advancing skills in the technical and communication side of radio. 3 license levels, technician, general, and amateur extra. You go on the air as soon as the FCC issues your license on their database. You may hold only 1 license grant, and your license grant is good for 10 years with a 2-year grace period. Don't transmit, though, until your license is renewed. Call signs. Give your call sign every 10 minutes and at the end of the communications. No call sign required when controlling model craft or model airplanes. Vanity call signs are available to all licensed amateurs. Typical technician class call sign, K1XXX. Phonetic alphabet is encouraged, and a club station must have at least 4 club members. Tactical call signs like race headquarters, they're fine, but every 10 minutes, give your call sign at the end of your communications. English is the language to give your call sign, and a call sign stroke W3, slant W3, slash W3 means that you are in the W3 call sign area. And the United Nations agency that controls technology issues is the International Telecommunications Union, ITU. Hams can communicate with other countries as long as any country whose administration has notified the International Telecommunication that might object. We only have 2 that object, so we're good to go. Yes, we can also visit foreign countries with a reciprocal operating permit to operate. And when we let someone else talk over the microphone that may not be a ham, they're called third-party traffic. And third-party traffic is limited to just a few countries that permit it from our stations. Great day for boating. Let's go out on the water and use ham radio. That's okay. Vessels or craft located in international water, documented and registered in the United States, sure, hams may operate from that vessel. You are in control. Remember, a ham station is permitted to transmit only with a control operator. If there's no control operator, never may that station continue on the air. And the control operator is any amateur whose privileges allow them to transmit, and that could include on the satellite uplink as well for you technician class operators soon to pass the test. So who can designate a control operator? That would be the station licensee. The FCC tunes in. They don't know who's operating, so the FCC would feel that it is you, the station licensee, in control. And remember, the control operator and the station licensee are both responsible for the communications going over the airwaves. And the transmitting privileges of an amateur station are limited to the operator license held by the control operator. As a technician class operator, could you operate on the extra class portions of the band? No, at no time. The control point, that's a control operator function position. Automatic control could be repeater operation. An example of remote control, operating a station over the internet. Yes, a teacher may be on the clock and compensated for teaching ham radio in the classroom. Not a problem. And if something comes over the radio repeater that you are the control operator, it is the control operator of the originating station that is responsible. Not allow obscenity, interference, jamming another signal, transmitting to the general public. You can't do those, but these following are legal. One-way communications, code, practice, information bulletin, or transmitting emergency messages. Emergency messages to the general public allowed in an emergency only. Only time you could scramble a signal would be the radio control of a model airplane or craft. Perfectly okay to buy and sell ham radio equipment over the air as long as you don't do it on a regular basis. And yes, the FCC will gain entry with permission if they ask to look at your station. You must maintain your correct mailing address. If you don't, the FCC could cancel your license. Radio frequencies of all types called RF. The radio wave is electromagnetic with electric and magnetic fields. Radio waves travel at the speed of light, 300 million meters per second. And the oscillation of the up and down of the cycles is called frequency. The unit of frequency is the hertz. A million is a megahertz, and 3525 kilohertz could be 3.525 megahertz. One complete cycle is the radio wavelength, and we call bands by their wavelength. As wavelength gets shorter, frequency increases. 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz equals wavelength. High frequency, HF3 to 30 megahertz, 200 watts for technician class operators. Very high frequency, VHF, 30 to 300 megahertz. UHF, ultra high frequency, 300 to 3000 megahertz, and can run 1500 watts of power. 6 meters, 52.525. 2 meters, 146 4.52. On the 440 band, don't interfere with government stations on 70 centimeters, the 440 band. Finally, don't operate on the very edge of a band because the calibration of your transmitter might not be accurate. The modulation could extend beyond the band edge and you could drift. All of those are correct. These are the keywords, and you'll see them in blue in my book. So just before you take the test, grab my book and read the keywords in blue. All right, take a break, and then we'll see you on CD number 2.
All right, how did that work out for everybody? Good?
Dwayne,
Yes, sir.
if you turn on you go on your radio one day, you turn it on, and I want to talk to you, let's say, how do I find you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So people do set up schedules occasionally, and you know, like for the instance when I was talking about my dad and I communicating, now, we actually don't have a schedule, but you can set up a schedule with someone. People do if they're wanting to make a contact with, say that they're chasing an award. There are different awards that you can go after if you wish to. You know, the American Radio Relay League has some. There's another group called CQ that has some. But one of those awards might be worked all states. And so you've worked every state except for Hawaii. For some reason, you're just not able to get into Hawaii somehow or another. You could get on the internet, and there's some bulletin boards out there, whatever you can put in. I'm looking to make a contact with somebody in Hawaii so I can get my WAS. And somebody may come back and say, hey, I'll work you. How about we meet on this frequency on this date and time, you know, that kind of thing. But it's not like there's a phone book out there saying that, you know, Wayne's sitting at 14.270, right? Now, if you're operating in the VHF area and there's a community with a repeater, like if you came down here to Brunswick, Georgia, and you look, there is a thing called a repeater directory. You can get a hardbound one, or again, the Google machine, and you find the KG4PXG is one of the repeaters here. There's a very good chance you'll find me on that, and you can make a call out there.
So if a group of us want to be able to communicate when there's a communication blackout in the country, we should already have a plan written so we could find each other.
Definitely. Yeah. You'll need to have that. You'll need to have that planned out. So, okay. Okay. Thanks, Peggy. All right. What we'll do is we'll go first off. Any other questions before we move on? So what we'll do now is we're going to go through these questions. I'm trying to see how many there are. There's a number of them. We might not get through all of them. We're going to go through at least some of these questions. And if it's okay with you folks, what we'll do is we'll take a quick lunch break for about a half an hour. Is that good with everybody? All right.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay, excellent. So let me run through some of these. Let me find where I am first. Oh, there we go. All right. So the nice thing is all this stuff that Gordon just talked about, you're going to see again. So, and oh, by the way, while that was playing, I had this PowerPoint up. I made this up a couple days ago with some stuff. I'm going to get this PowerPoint to all of you folks. That's the technician class frequency privileges there. We talked about wavelength. That's what we're going to deal with now is wavelength versus frequency. Radio waves travel at the speed of light. Obviously here on Earth, it's pretty darn close to the speed of light, right? But still 300 million meters per second. That's the number that we operate off of. And if you need to convert a frequency to a wavelength, you see this, it's the Greek lambda. If you see that as wavelength equals 300 of the frequency in megahertz, I'm sure you recognize that we get 300 from the speed of light, right? And then wavelength to frequency is 300 over the wavelength. And you're going to get some practice with that as we go along. There are a couple of questions and being able to make these conversions. And then this is when we're going to get into Ohm's law and the and electrical stuff. And that's where we start getting into antennas. To be honest with you, don't get freaked out about the formulas. There's only a few of them, and you will have math on the test, but you're not going to have a lot, and it's going to be pretty simple. So don't freak out too much. So here we go. This is where we are now. Tech frequencies. What does the abbreviation RF refer to? I think we heard that a while ago. It's radio frequency. So RF always refers to, at least in the radio world, radio frequency. If you try to use RF for something else, you're going to confuse people in the radio world. But it is radio frequency. So your answer there is A. What type of wave carries radio signals between transmitting and receiving stations? It's the electromagnetic wave. The answer is A. There's a demo I do with the kids. I guess I could have tried to pull it off here. I'd have to stand back away from the camera, but I have metal, small metal balls, like large sized marbles, right? So I have some that are metal, and I have some that look exactly like the metal ones, but they're magnetic. And I have a copper tube that the balls could slide through. So what I do with the kids is, it's a really neat demo. The tube's, I don't know, about 6 feet tall. And I'll have one of the kids stand on a chair holding this tube, and they'll hold the ball up there. And I'll tell one of the other kids that's standing there, say, I remind them, so you know how to count, right? 1001, 1002. Here's what I want you to do. Your buddy there is going to drop that ball through the tube, and I want you to count how long it takes that ball to go through. Of course, the first one I send through the first few times, it's going to be the metal ball, right? So as soon as it goes through, they go 1,000. Well, that's all I get. I'm like, there must be something wrong here. And I'll get them to swap places. And while they're swapping places, what I'll do is I'll swap the metal ball for the magnetic one. And then we'll do it again. All right, I want you to count now, 1001, 1002. So the other one drops the ball through there, and they all get fascinated, because now that metal ball that took like half a second to go through is taking 9 seconds or more to drop through there. And what I'm demonstrating there, first off, I fascinate them, which is what I like to do. It's always a lot of fun. Makes me look cool, right? But the point of that is, I explain to them, when you're dealing with radio waves, you're dealing with two principles. The first principle is, anytime that you have a moving or a changing magnetic wave, you're causing electrons to move. And anytime you have moving electrons, you're causing a magnetic wave to happen. So you can see that they kind of work together, right? As that magnetic ball is dropping through that copper tube, copper is a conductor, and it has all those atoms in there. And we're going to get into that when we get into theory a little bit. As that magnetic wave, it's a changing magnetic wave as it drops through that tube. Since it's a changing magnetic wave, it's causing electrons, which are inside the tube and make up the tube, to vibrate. But now that they're moving, they're causing another magnetic wave to be formed. But that magnetic wave is in opposition to the first magnetic wave. So that magnetic wave, although weaker, it's like trying to push that ball back up. And that's the reason why it takes that ball so much longer to go through. And the idea here is, whenever you're dealing with something like this, you have an interaction between electricity, which is your electrons moving, and magnetism. For your radio wave, you've seen the image of the radio wave, and you're going to see it again. It looks like a sine wave, but in reality, there's two parts of that sine wave. There's the one that you normally see, but there's one at a 90-degree angle. That's the magnetic portion of that wave. So your radio wave is actually an electromagnetic wave, not just an electric wave. The portion that we're interested in mostly is the electric portion. We call it the E portion. But that's the reason why it's called an electromagnetic wave. There's actually two portions to that. So maybe after lunch I'll try to show you that. See how well it goes over on the video. So, does there anybody have any questions about that, or did that make sense, or at least make sense enough to help you get through the test? So, okay, cool. Electromagnetic wave. A radio wave is made up of what energy? Electromagnetic. We just covered that. It's electromagnetic energy. So there's two pieces to that. What two types? What are the two components of a radio wave? Electric and magnetic fields. I lost my place. There we go. All right. How fast does a radio wave travel through space or through free space? It is at the speed of light, and it's 300 million meters per second. That's the number that we use. What is the approximate velocity of a radio wave as it travels through free space? Sounds a lot like the same question, right? It's still 300 million meters per second. What describes the number of times per second that an alternating current makes a complete cycle? We call it a we call it a frequency. Frequency sounds a lot like the word frequently, right? What we're asking here, or what we're looking for, is how frequently does a complete wave cycle happen in a certain amount of time? And in this case, we use a certain amount of time. We use 1 second as a certain amount of time. So we call it the frequency, meaning cycles per second. What's the unit of frequency? It's hertz, not the rental car company. That is named after a German fellow who validated a gentleman by the name Maxwell's his theory, his formulas, and he actually did a spark gap thing and made it work, which is kind of neat. Hertz. What is the proper abbreviation for megahertz? It is capital M, capital H, and a lowercase z. If a frequency display calibrated in megahertz shows a reading of 3.525 megahertz, what would it show if it were calibrated in kilohertz? We all remember the metric system. For those of us in the US, it could be a little more difficult. For those of you in Canada, I think you're good with it, right? But in electronics and in radio, and it's all in metric. So if you're not familiar with the metric system, get yourself familiar with the metric system. And when there are metric questions, just kind of memorize these. But in this case, it's 3.525 megahertz is 3,525 kilohertz. All we did was we moved the decimal place 3 places to the right. What is the name for the distance a radio wave travels during one complete cycle? We call it the wavelength. So as you can imagine, a radio wave, and being an electromagnetic wave, it is an alternating current wave. It alternates up and down and up and down. But that wavelength, that first complete cycle, travels a certain distance away from your antenna as it radiates. The lower your frequency, the further that radio wave is going to travel. Right now, I've got my radio tuned to 14.230 megahertz. That's the 20 meter band. What that means is that every wave, that first complete cycle as it comes off is going to travel 20 meters in distance before it starts another one. What property of radio waves is often used to identify the different frequency bands? It is the wavelength. When you get your license, and especially when you start dealing with the high frequency band, you're going to find that we use wavelength a lot. If I'm telling somebody you'll find me on 40 meters, what I'm telling them that I'm going to be in the 7 megahertz portion of the amateur radio band. But that's common to do. And if you go, I love these things. I've restored a few, but if you go find some of the old AM radios from the golden age of radio, you'll find some that are actually labeled in using the wavelength rather than the frequency. They'll have the wavelength on there, or maybe even both. What does the wavelength of a radio wave, or how does the wavelength of a radio wave relate to its frequency? All right, so the higher the frequency, the shorter the distance. It's kind of common sense if you think about it. Higher the frequency. Higher the frequency means the more times a wave or a complete cycle happens in a second. But in order for that to happen, that means that wavelength has got to get really, really short. It's going to have to shorten up so that you can get that number of cycles in that 1 second. I think it kind of makes sense, right? So if you can think about it, the higher the frequency, the shorter the distance. That's the way it always works. What is the formula for converting frequency to approximate wavelength in meters? It is wavelength in meters equals 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz. I will send you this this PowerPoint I put together for you. Those of you who do have the book, though, you'll find this page in the book, and it'll show you. It'll give you that formula. When it comes to the formulas, by the way, this is something I teach bring up quite often. You're getting ready to take your test. You can't have this material available to you when you take the test. You can have a calculator. We prefer for it not to be a programmable calculator. If it is programmable, we have to check to make sure it's not programmed. So you can't walk in and take this test with these formulas written down. What I tell people is take the time to memorize the formulas. Once you get in and you sit down, you're going to have the test, and you can have blank scratch paper with you and such. Once your test examiner or your examiner says that you can start, at that point, what I tell people is take all of those formulas that you have in your mind. There's only a few of them for the technician class. But take all those formulas, write them all down on that scratch paper. Just go ahead and get them written down. Once you've done that, you can now clear your brain of that because now you've got them written down. And you can go take your test and not have to worry about remembering the formulas because you've got them sitting right there. So that is the that's how you convert right there. So I'm going to ask everybody to the next question is going to be a math question. You're going to see the answer, but what I would like for you to do is at least give it a try. I'll give all of you a chance to give it a try. Just give me a thumbs up whenever you're done and see if you came up with the answer. Okay. So here's the first one. What frequency range is, well, this isn't a math question. I was wrong. What frequency range is referred to as HF? It's the 3 to 30 megahertz band. What is the maximum peak envelope power? Don't get hung up over the lingo. Really what they're saying is what's the maximum power that you can transmit on the HF bands? For the technician class, it's 200 watts. What are the frequency limits for the VHF band? It is 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz. Don't get confused here. You see there's kilohertz and megahertz. You want to stick to megahertz right there. So. What are the frequency limits of the UHF band? It is 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz to 3,000 megahertz. We also call that 3 gigahertz, by the way. Except for some specific restrictions, what is the maximum peak envelope power for a technician class above 30 megahertz? You're now getting into the VHF and UHF band, and anything above 30 megahertz, you can go as the full 1500 watts. Once you get your general class license, you can go 1500 watts on the HF band as well. Something about the amount of power you can use. The radio that you see in the video, that my HF radio right here, 100 watts max. To be honest with you, I transmit usually between 30 and 70. That's it. I have, to the best of my knowledge, I'm sitting there thinking right now, I don't think I've ever transmitted more than 100 watts, even on the VHF and UHF bands. Which frequency is within the 6 meter amateur band? This is your math question. So I'll give everybody a chance to try to work it out. How did everybody do? Did anybody still working on it? I can only see a few of the videos. Let me scroll down here. I think I can see them. Everybody's good, I think. I'm hoping everybody got the answers. In this case, your answer would have come out to 50, right? And you see that 52.525. I have gotten the question, what about 49? Well, no, that's not actually the answer. 52.525 is actually in the 6 meter band, and that is the only answer that has the number 50 in it, if you will, 50 or 52. So, so again, what you're trying to do is find the frequency. So it's 300 over the wavelength, right? And the wavelength in this case is 6 meters. All right, are we good? Not too bad, right?
Sounds good.
All right, which amateur band are you using when your station is transmitting on 146.52 megahertz? I'll give you guys a chance to work that one out as well. All right, so so this one is, you're still using 300, but in this case, you're using 300 over the frequency in megahertz. Your frequency in megahertz being 146.52. When you get done with the math, you'll see that it's about 2.05 meters. In other words, it's the 2-meter band. So your answer is A there, the 2-meter band. So hopefully those weren't too difficult for you. And it's the math is not hard at all. I will tell you that we do get into logarithms. Don't freak out. You'll see the formula for logarithms. This is what I tell my students every single time. There are only 3 possible questions that deal with logarithms in the technician class license pool. 3. So the chances of you getting one of them are pretty small. I'm not saying you won't get one of them, but the chances of you getting one of them, 3 out of 423 questions, is pretty small. I recommend for those 3 questions, just memorize the answer. Okay, and we'll just go about it that way. What is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operations in the 2-meter band? For the 2 meters, 146.52. This is where this becomes handy, and it somewhat goes with the question that Mr. Bart just asked a while ago. How do you find me on the radio? If I'm traveling in my truck, I have 2 frequencies going at the same time. One is my local repeater, which is KG4PXG, and I have 146.52 going as well. And you'll find a lot of amateur radio operators, as they are traveling up and down the interstate, they'll usually have their radios set up on 146.52. It's a simplex frequency, but every once in a while, and it works great, every once in a while, jump on there and say, KB4 DSL, if anybody out there, you'll be surprised how many times you get somebody answer. And it's kind of neat. And actually this afternoon, this kid that I told you about, KM1 TCH, he and I are going to try doing simplex across to St. Simon's Island later this evening and play around a bit. So remember this frequency. It's your friend, 146.52. That is the national simplex. So Bart, if you're trying to find me on FM simplex and you're near me, you'll find me there. So, all right. What is the limitations for emissions on the frequencies between 219 and 220 megahertz? So it's fixed digital message forwarding systems only. Sounds like packet radio, and you're going to hear packet radio here soon. So, but that's it. Fixed digital message forwarding systems. What is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC? So the band plan, and if you go to the American Radio Relay League, you'll find it, or you can just, again, get on the Google machine. I say that rather than say Google. Get on there and Google, because Google is actually not a verb, even though people use it as one. But jump on there, amateur radio band plan. You'll find them. They're not law. There's nothing that mandates using them in there. There are some things that are required, such as there are certain portions of, or the lower portion of the 6 meter, 2 meter, and the 70 centimeter band, which are exclusive for CW. That's actually kind of set in stone. But the rest of it is stuff that we agreed to. And it does a couple things. It keeps people from kind of bouncing on top of each other. Like there's a portion of the band strictly for phone or voice, a portion strictly for data or CW. And the other thing that makes it nice is most people know that I'm a CW op. That's usually where you'll find me. And there are portions of the HF band which primarily are CW and data. And so if you're looking for me, there's only a small portion of the band you have to try to hunt for me rather than the entire thing. But it is voluntary. So keep that in mind. A band plan is voluntary. There's nothing that says you can't go outside of it. You might end up with some willful interference. We'll see. Yeah, it is a voluntary thing. Which of the following is a result of the fact that the amateur radio service is secondary in all or portions of some amateur bands? So I'll talk about secondary. The answer here is U.S. amateurs may find non-amateur stations in these portions and must avoid interfering with them. Now, you heard Gordon West talk about that a while ago, and he mentioned the military bands, or certain portions of the military bands that we have secondary on, which is interesting. I'll be honest with you, I think the more interesting thing that we have secondary on are the Wi-Fi bands. So your Wi-Fi that you have in your house, 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz bands, amateur radio operators have secondary on that. Here's what's kind of neat about that. A number of the off-the-shelf wireless routers and such that you find, We can actually flash those with a different set of firmware. And now that Wi-Fi, that Wi-Fi radio, that's all a wireless router is. It's just another radio. All I've done now is I've converted that radio into something that's now being present into the amateur radio service. Using the same frequencies, it's got my call sign now built into it. And usually once you flash these that way, you can't flash them back. But here's what's nice about that. Now I can add antennas to it. I can also bump up the power. On the non-licensed portion of those Wi-Fi bands, I think the most you can transmit might be up to a watt, maybe just a little bit more. Do you remember what our maximum power output that we can do on the VHF and UHF bands or and the Wi-Fi bands? Do you remember? Should. It could be a test question. It's 1,500 watts. Yeah. So we can actually create our own wireless network using these routers, which is kind of a neat thing to be able to do. We're using our secondary privileges. We just have to make sure that we're not interfering with the primary. And how do we do that? We make sure we can do some scans to figure out which Wi-Fi bands or which Wi-Fi channels are actually being used. It just so happens the ones, there are several, I think 14, I think in the US maybe only 11 Wi-Fi channels, of which 3 primarily are used, 1, 6, and 11. So if you're operating outside of 1, 6, and 11, chances are you're not going to be interfering with anything. And the reason why those 3, if you learn anything about Wi-Fi, those 3 bands actually don't overlap each other. So
can you listen in on military communications?
I don't. It doesn't, only because I'm not interested in doing that. I could if I wanted to, but yeah, I generally don't. So back to this. The answer is A. U.S. amateurs may find 9 amateur stations in these portions, and if they have the primary, we can't interfere with them. Why should you not set your transmit frequency to be exactly at the edge of the amateur band? Yeah, the answer is D. Yeah, all of these to allow for calibration error, so the modulation sidebands don't extend beyond the band edge, and to allow the transmitter frequency drift. When you're sending a signal on your radio, I've got my radio right now tuned to 14.230. That happens to be the slow scan TV section of the 20 meter band, which I'm going to show you after a while. But even though I'm tuned to that, when I transmit on that, I'm going to be transmitting a signal that is far more than just 14.230. It's going to cover a portion of the band. It's going to cover several more frequencies than just 14.230. But those band edges, treat those band edges as a concrete wall. We can't go over those. Even with our modulation, we can't go over those. So you want to make sure that you're allowing yourself enough room to allow your transmission and any other subband transmissions that come off of that to stay within our portion of the RF spectrum. That's all that means there. So all of those answers there are correct. All right. So we got through that, our first technical subject. I hope that didn't hurt you too much. I do tell the kids, I tell them my job's not done unless they have a headache, but I'm going to try not to do that with you. But that was
You're getting close.
I'm getting close. Okay. Our first technical subject is finished there. Before we break for lunch, anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
Where are you going?
I have a question. Does each one in the household have to have its own license? Like, can my husband share mine, or does he have to have his own?
Everybody has to have their own. Yeah, so which is unfortunately here because my wife has no interest in getting an amateur radio license. She's funny. She calls with our friends. She calls me Tech Weenie, which I tell her I prefer geek or nerd. But anyway, but she has no interest in this whatsoever. I have 3 kids, 2 are boys. I try to get them interested. They're not interested. So I'm the only ham in this house. But being that means they can't use my license. So no, everybody has to have their own. That is a very good question. Thanks for that. Any others? Okay, I'm showing 10 to 12. So how about we come back? I think that would be 12:20 for half an hour. Is that correct?
Yes.
Doing math in my head can be dangerous. So I'm just saying. So
we'll help you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave my camera up I will mute my microphone. But if anybody has anything that they want to throw out at me, you can yell at me. I'm going to step out, and my kitchen is just right on the other side of this door here. And I'm going to get some lunch. I might actually eat in here. Or if anybody wants to send me a text and say that they have a question, I'll jump back right on camera. But I'll leave my camera and everything up and running. And when we get back, we'll start talking about radios, and I'll show you a few things that, to consider for getting your first radio. All right.
Thank you, Wayne. This has been great. Great information.
Great. I'm glad. All right. Well, break, and I'll see you folks at 12:20.
Wayne, can I ask you a question? Larry Bird.
Yeah, please, go
I ordered that book Reese suggested to order. Do you have any idea when it might come in?
ahead. Did you order from Amazon?
No, the other one.
So you did not order it from Amazon? I don't know when it would come in.
Amazon was out of them.
Oh, okay.
Order
Yeah,
from that other group that you
W5IY or something like that, or
yeah, W5YI.
yeah, right. No, I've had good luck with them though. I got that's where I get my instructor manuals and stuff for the Gordon West stuff. So and usually within a few days. So.
Is it snail mail or is it
Snail mail?
Okay, it might be a while then. Okay.
I got a funny story on that. So we have the privilege. I'm using that word loosely. My wife's birthday is on the 27th of December. So after the whole spin up of making sure we get everybody taken care of for Christmas and get worn out from that, now we got to think about what to get Betsy for her birthday, right? But this year, I did her birthday gift first. It's kind of a story about why sand dollars are important to us here, but they're especially important to my wife. So on Amazon, I found it's a really nice necklace that it's a 14 karat gold kind of thing that has a an image of a sand dollar on it, right? We got her something else to go along with that, but anyway, so I ordered that and it was coming to us by snail mail. So I actually ordered it. I'm trying to remember the history. I believe I ordered it on December the 6th. And on December the 11th, the tracking showed that it left a USPS shipping station, whatever, facility in Brooklyn, New York. And from then to the 20th, nothing. So I reach out to the Postal Service and send in a thing to start the investigation of where my package is. And of course, they responded with that the package isn't late yet. So I'm like, okay, clowns, I'll wait for another few days for you to decide to figure out what I already know, right? But the problem is USPS, they stopped communicating. So in the meantime, in an attempt to make sure that my wife gets something for her birthday in a reasonable amount of time, I ordered a second one. It got lost too, being shipped out of the same facility. So the clowns from the Postal Service sent me a survey and asking me how satisfied I am at the resolution of my case. Keep in mind, it's not been resolved yet, right? So how well do you think that survey went? So I completed that survey on, I think it was December actually it was December the 27th, my wife's birthday. I completed that survey. I want you to know that on December the 28th, suddenly both of those packages show up in the Jacksonville USPS facility just an hour south of us.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, never did hear back from the Postal Service on my actual investigation. So both of the ones that I ordered got here a few days later because it ended up getting here into Brunswick and it got stuck in the Brunswick facility for like 2 days. I don't know. I almost drove over to get it myself. But both of them got here. So I'm still in the process of sending one back. But when I got up this morning, I got up about 5 o'clock this morning and got everything all set up and ready for this, right? And I jumped on my email. You know what I found? Another survey from.
Wow.
I've been known to have a temper every once in a while, but
oh, have you?
I decided I better let this one sit and simmer a little bit before I start answering these questions because.
Hey, that's what car dealers do when you buy a new car. They send within a week they send a survey out. How happy are you? Well, say I don't know. It hadn't broke down yet.
On the products, some
gotta break it in, man.
Yeah, they give it survey and our 5-star rating, find out they've owned it for 2 weeks. It's like, come on, dude. There's no way. All right, I'm showing 12:24. Are we all good for getting started?
Wow. Ready to go.
Okay.
Let me close my door over here. Let everybody know that, you know, I'm in the middle of a major production. They need to leave me alone. So. Actually, I'll say this is where all my radio stuff is as well. And inevitably, I could sit here. I could sit here and just listen on the radio for like an hour and nobody will bother me. And I'll swear the very moment I get on my key and I start sending CQ, one of the kids want to come in and talk to me. So I told my wife, I'm going to get one of those on the air signs that lights up.
Yeah.
Outside the door. All right, great. I hope everybody had a good lunch. So I'll let you know that I had cooked up this a night or so ago some I made up kind of a garlic teriyaki kind of salmon thing, and I had leftovers. That's what I had for lunch today. Man, it was excellent. All right, let me see here. Before we get started in the lessons, one thing I wanted to do is, here we go. Talk one more time about the website stuff where you can go and practice your tests. There's no way I can stress enough about getting on here and just banging out questions. I tell the kids this as well. Get on here and just run questions and run questions and run questions. The more times you see the questions and the answers, the better and you're going to remember them as you get to the test. So I couldn't stress that enough. So I just pulled one up here. I told you hamstudy.org is my favorite one. Again, I'm not being endorsed by them, but that is the one I'm going to show you. I know a lot of them, or most of the rest of them maybe, works the same way as this one. But I just want to show you a little bit about how this works. So I've got and you can do any of the class licenses you want to. And by the way, for our Canadian friends, I'm pretty sure that there is, I don't know if it's this one or hamstudy.com, that they have a Canadian version. I did notice that on the RAC website that I sent you guys. So anyway, so this is hamstudy.org. So for just running questions, they have the study mode. They have the study mode here. And when you click that, oh yeah, you're seeing it. When you click that, you have an option of either running all the questions or just different sub-elements. So if you want to go ahead, since we're running, we're going to be doing a lot of the material today. If you want to do all the questions, that's fine. You're going to end up seeing questions that you've not seen yet. There's no law about that. Go ahead and give it a try to see if you can answer the question. You very well may get it wrong, which is fine. But in this one here, which Q signal indicates that you're receiving interference from other stations? I happen to know it's QRM. So I'm going to go ahead and select QRM. There is a
QRM interference. Why do you know that?
Yeah. So QRM. So that's one of our Q signals. And the Q signal. And you can Google those. There are two, by the way, Q signals for interference. One is for, in this case, from other stations. We call that man-made. So QRM, mic for man-made. The other one is atmospheric. That would be N for natural. So go. So in this case, it's QRM. I know that. I'm going to click that, and it's going to tell me, yep, I'm correct. But notice right here where this, it kind of dog-eared this thing right here. If I click that I get some information as to why that's the answer, which is kind of nice. It's really nice, especially if you miss the question. Or if I did here, what instrument other than an SWR meter could you use to determine if a feed line and antenna are properly matched? The answer here is going to be a directional watt meter, but I could just, I don't know. It will tell me as the directional watt meter. And again, I can click this and it's going to give me some information as to why that's the answer. And you'll notice there's some stats here. I don't know that I ever really made any sense out of these stats, but really what these stats are doing is keeping track of where you're strong and where you're weak. And the places where you're weak, you're going to get more of those questions than you will of the strong, and just help build you up and get you ready for taking the test. So anyway, I'm pretty sure the other sites work the same way. I love this. And when you get to the point where you're ready to actually take a practice test, here you go. You can do a practice test. It's going to generate a 35 question practice test, and it's going to give you the number of questions per sub-element that you could expect on your test. It's going to be exactly like the test. And you just go through and just start answering the questions. And when you get finished, it will tell you whether you passed or failed. And if you missed any, you get a chance to go back and see which ones you missed and kind of play around some more and then study some more. But I recommend doing this, multiple times a day and get yourself ready for the exam. So, any questions on this before we move on? So I thought it'd be beneficial for y'all to see that. So there's our buddy again. All right, so we're starting back up, and we're going to talk about our first radio. Hang on one second. There we go. I have a few options here for a first radio. In my opinion, when you're getting ready to get started and you want to buy your first radio, probably the best thing you could do is go ahead and buy a handheld. The nice thing about the handheld, especially if there's a repeater nearby you, you should be able to hit that repeater, or you could build an antenna that could attach to your radio to extend your length or your distance, and you'll be able to communicate and get started using the radio. So a couple of really good options. And this is here we go.
Make a transition.
This is from a company called Baofeng. It is a Chinese radio. It's a Chinese-made radio. There is an American distributor of this called BTEC, and you can go to their website and check them out. The neat thing about BTEC, by the way, they actually have a statement of faith on their website, on their webpage, which I thought is neat. But you can find these as well. These Baofeng radios, you can find them on Amazon. There's a model called the UV, that's Uniform Victor 5R, being 5 Romeo, UV 5R. I think you can find them as cheap as $28. Includes the battery, the antenna, and charger and such. $28. Now, you can imagine in radio, when you're dealing with stuff like this, you get what you pay for, right? So are they the best radios in the world? No. Will they get you up and running and get you started? Yeah, I actually think that they are a really good starter radio. And they're analog only. We'll talk about more about analog and digital later on. But they're analog only. It will get you up on the radio or on the air. And with these radios, these especially these Chinese-made radios, you're going to want to try to program these using your computer. And there's a program called Chirp. It's free. You can download it. You program your frequencies and your offsets and stuff when you're dealing with repeaters, and then load that in here, because again, you get what you pay for. If I had to program this with the keypad the way that they want it programmed, I'd probably throw it at somebody before I got done. So I use the computer to program these, but these are excellent radios. Now, the one I'm actually holding here, it is a Baofeng radio, but this is the BF, meaning Bravo Foxtrot, which really they mean Baofeng. F8, Fox 8, HP for high power. It's an 8-watt radio. The UV5R is about a 4 or 5 watt radio, and you can adjust that wattage. There's usually about 3 wattage settings. There's a low, medium, and a high. At low, this thing puts out 1 watt. At medium, I think it's 4, and at high, it's supposed to be about 8. And for my youth students, I actually recommend them buying this radio or the UV5R when they come into my next class, which I used to call it Hams in Space. I just renamed it as Ham Radio Jumpstart. The reason why I did that is because we're going to open it up to the community for even adults who just got their license and want to know, okay, now what? I've got a license. What can I do with it now? And we do things with it. So I recommend people getting this. So this is a really good starter radio. So don't get put off by the fact that it's a cheap Chinese radio. It is a cheap Chinese radio, but they do work and will get you up on the air. So. And then another option when you start getting into more expensive, this is a Japanese radio. Yaesu for handheld is one of my, even for HF radios, are one of my favorite companies. I do like working with Yaesu. What's nice about this one is it's submersible. So if you're going to be doing any kind of operating, especially if you're going to be doing any kind of emergency services stuff where who knows what kind of environment you're going to end up in, this is a good radio to use. I mentioned to you the weather buoy that my students are putting together right now. Well, actually, we start the second semester here in a couple of weeks. This is the radio that's actually going to be inside the buoy right here. That's going to be transmitting the APRS. So
how do you spell that, Wayne? That brand, Yaesu?
Yaesu, Y-A-E-S-U. That's Yankee Alpha Echo Sierra Uniform.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, analog only. I think the max power on this might be 5 watts, which is fine. But another, and now I told you for this Baofeng model, the UV5R, you could probably get as cheap as $28. This particular radio here, the F8HP, is I think they're running about $65 to $70 right now, which is still not overly expensive. This right here is about a $200 radio, but again, this is it's definitely a better radio, and it's submersible, so that's part of what makes it a little bit more expensive.
What's the model number on that Yaesu, Wayne?
Oh yeah, this is the FT Foxtrot Tango 270. Now this is this is a VHF only radio, where this is a VHF and UHF dual band radio. So okay, and then a third option, another one of my favorites. This is also a Yaesu radio. This is my go-to radio on any given day. It's kind of small. It fits my hand quite nicely. This is also a dual band VHF UHF, but this is an analog and a digital radio, and we're going to talk about the digital portion here shortly. But the analog piece, I can still get to repeaters. I can still talk to people via simplex